is acquiring soft skills like computer literacy.
Gabriel Aikman, the co-founder at BUG, Africa's largest job simulation platform. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. So we do have several questions that we'd love for our panelists to delve into. And some of these questions are meant for us to understand first the challenges that young people, especially young people with disabilities, are facing. We also would love to understand what opportunities are out there for not just the young persons with disabilities, but for employers, to take on so that they are able to easily provide access to decent employment to young people. We shall also delve into some opportunities for collaboration between different organizations or different stakeholders that need to be very intentional about this topic at hand. So I'm going to start this panel discussion by just asking Mr. Daniel. So as a representative, pardon me. Before I start, I just wanted to let you know or inform you, in case we have anyone who doesn't understand French, we do have headphones at the back that I guess someone can help us distribute, because Mr. Daniel will be responding to our discussion questions in French. I think we do have one more here. All right. So back to you, Mr. Daniel. As a representative of an organization of persons with disabilities, could you briefly share with us, according to your knowledge and experience working with young persons with disabilities, what do you think are the aspirations, challenges, and the needs of youth with disabilities regarding the increased digitalized economy currently, especially in the area of work?
Mesdames et messieurs, bonjour. Comme elle vient de le dire, je m'appelle Daniel. Je suis le représentant d'une organisation appelée Self-Advocacy Initiative for People with Disability. C'est une organisation créée en 2014 avec le but, bien sûr, d'aider les personnes handicapées. Nous spécialisons, nous nous occupons spécialement à des enfants avec handicap mental. Bon, en général aussi avec des personnes handicapées. Et voilà. Pour le moment, elle vient de me poser la question de répondre à ce qui concerne les aspirations, les défis et les besoins des personnes handicapées à l'économie numérisée. Donc, je dirais que à ce qui concerne les aspirations, les jeunes handicapés aspirent à une inclusion totale dans le monde professionnel. Ils souhaitent pouvoir accéder aux mêmes opportunités que leurs pairs non handicapés, notamment en matière de formation en carrière de développement personnel. La numérisation offre des possibilités considérées pour travailler à distance, ce qui est perçu comme un tout majeur par beaucoup. Partons immédiatement sur le défi. Cependant, cette numérisation pose également des défis importants. L'accessibilité des outils numériques n'est pas toujours garantie, ce qui peut limiter l'accès à certaines ressources ou de plateformes. De plus, il y a un manque de sensibilisation, de formation des employés sur les besoins spécifiques des travailleurs handicapés, ce qui peut conduire à un environnement de travail handicapé. Sur ceci, je reviens à expliquer ces défis à des personnes handicapées dépendent de la catégorie de l'handicap de la personne. Parce que parmi les personnes handicapées, nous avons plus de 3-4 catégories, notamment l'handicap physique, l'handicap mental, l'handicap visuel. À ceci, j'explique encore. Les défis à différentes catégories de personnes présentent des obstacles à pouvoir accéder à cette économie numérisée. Je dirais par exemple comme des personnes les surmuets, les immigrés ont toujours besoin de l'interprétation. Si on n'a pas une interprétation de notre personne, je dis de l'interprétation signal, des signaux. À une pareille personne ne peut pas accéder à une économie numérisée suite à cet obstacle. C'est difficile à pouvoir y arriver. Ainsi concerne sera la catégorie de l'handicap. Je pars sur les besoins, comme m'a été posé la question. Pour surmonter ces défis, plusieurs besoins doivent être adressés. Premièrement, il est essentiel de garantir les technologies qui et plateformes numériques soient accessibles à tous, conformément aux normes de l'accessibilité. Deuxièmement, des programmes de formation spécialisés pour les jeunes handicapés sont nécessaires pour leur permettre de développer les compétences techniques requises. Enfin, une sensibilisation accrue des employés et des collègues est cruciale pour favoriser un environnement de travail inclusif et respectueux. J'étais en train de dire comment il faut surmonter à ces défis. Ce que je viens de dire n'est pas parfaitement suffisant. Il y en aurait encore à faire des recherches parce que ici, des techniques, des outils technologiques, des outils technologiques pour la personne handicapée doivent être un peu plus spéciaux encore, plus spéciaux que possible. J'arrête sur le résumé. Bien que le monde du travail numérisé offre de nouvelles opportunités pour les jeunes handicapés, il est indispensable de travailler sur l'accessibilité. Je reviens les mots sur l'accessibilité parce que les personnes handicapées ont plus besoin d'un environnement accessible plus que les autres. Les formations et les sensibilisations pour assurer une véritable inclusion. Merci.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for your contribution. And I must say there's a lot of insight in what Daniel did mention, especially around training and awareness. And following up from Daniel's response, I would love to ask my next question to Sarah. So from your perspective, working with site savers, could you just share your insights into the strategies and initiatives that are being undertaken to promote school-to-work transition and employment opportunities to youth with disabilities in the digital economy?
Sure. My name is Sarah Wangombe, and I work at Site Savers as a technical advisor for economic empowerment. Site Savers is a non-profit organization operating in 33 countries. We are working to reduce avoidable causes of blindness and to promote the inclusion of people with disabilities around the world. So One of the starting points that we typically have when we are setting up any economic development programs for youth with disabilities is to carry out a labor market assessment, more like a rapid labor market assessment, to be able to understand what are the barriers and facilitators within the specific country that we are working in that either enable or prevent people with disabilities from being able to access jobs, and what are the motivators and also the catalyst and the barriers that are preventing employers from being able to create inclusive spaces and to promote that transition to jobs. And to just add on some of the challenges that my fellow panelist has mentioned. So some of the issues we find, for example, in the job seeker side is having limited skills, both technical as well as soft skills, that would enable them to be able to transition to jobs in the digital economy. So lack of limited educational opportunities and lack of accessibility and inclusion in the education spaces are one of those factors. But even when they make it to go to school in colleges, what we found in Nigeria and Kenya is interesting, because you find that students with disabilities are channeled towards certain courses, like, no, you cannot be a computer engineer, you cannot study cybersecurity. You can become a teacher though, so perhaps try education or try social work, but not this other area that, because of the attitudes towards the capability of people with disabilities. And that's it on the job seeker side, but also the barriers in the employer side, barriers in terms of employers' attitudes towards the capability of people with disabilities, attitudes towards how much it costs to accommodate job seekers with disabilities within their organization, but also just the lack of knowledge of what to do. And most of the employers that we spoke to, we didn't come across an employer who said, no, I would not hire a person with disabilities. Many of them said, I would want to, but where are they? Where are those qualified job seekers with disabilities with the digital skills that I'm looking for, right? Where are they? We put out call for applications, but they're not applying to the jobs you're not advertising. But don't forget that these employers are not collecting disability data, so they don't know that they are already there within the organizations or not. But that's probably a discussion for another day. And also, inaccessibility in the application mechanisms, the recruitment mechanisms and such. And so within those labor market, within that labor market assessment, so what we've done then is to build programs that improve the skills of persons with disabilities in terms of their technical skills and their soft skills, and facilitate employers to be disability confident so they have a more positive environment that job seekers with disabilities, youths, can get into. So far, we've run a program since 2021. It's called an IT Bridge Academy, where we train youths with disabilities in cybersecurity and networking. Thank you so much. So we have two types of programs, a physical academy as well as a virtual academy. Within the physical academy, we train in CCNA and CCT for a period of 9 months. So far, we've enrolled about 240 students with youths with disabilities in Nigeria as well as in Kenya. A significant part of them have graduated. I don't know if I included that detail, but we tend to always, sorry? Yes, not 100% pass it. For those that complete, I think about 200 so far have completed. For those that complete, they get 100% pass rate at first attempt of the Cisco Certified Networking Associate exam. This is above the pass rate generally for Cisco in any of these programs, but that's because of the adaptations that we apply within the programs to enable youths with disabilities, both men and women, to succeed when they're enrolled within that. But we also have another virtual academy, and within that, we want to support youths with disabilities who are not able to commit that amount of time to still be able to get entry-level training in cybersecurity. We piloted in August last year, and 13 people completed. Again, 100% pass rate at first attempt, and we're going to be enrolling an additional 150 people this year. And whenever we put out a call for application, we are looking for about 50 people per class, and we get about 500 to 600 applications, both in Kenya as well as Nigeria. I mean, separately, that is. So there's a huge demand by youths with disabilities for their digital skills, but there isn't a lot of spaces where they can be able to study that. So that's just a message for you in case you're wondering, Where are those youths? Do they really want to study this? Yes, they do. There's a huge demand for that, and hence the importance to be working with organizations of persons with disabilities to be able to reach those youths, to even be able to answer the questions from employers. Where are those skilled youths with disabilities? And finally, the other pathway we have multiple people who don't get through these programs, so we provide soft skills training and employability skills training. So far, 3,900 youths have been able to complete about 66,000 modules, and within that, it's they study different things: CV writing, networking, etc. And then there are components of mentorship and such. So this is on the job seeker side, preparing them in terms of their technical skills and their soft skills. Moving on to my next slide, I think. In the employer side, the big part is about their disability confidence, so supporting them in carrying out accessibility assessments and adopting the recommendations within that, revising their policies, training the managers and supervisors who are going to be working with persons with disabilities, and linking them to people with disabilities who are skilled in these areas, so to be able to promote that transition. So that's part of what we're doing in Africa at the moment. Thank you.
That's very impressive, I must say. I guess you all agree, you know. There's actually organizations out there being very intentional about creating practical solutions to the problem that we are currently discussing. I do have a follow-up question for you, though. Looking at the figures, they seem very impressive. I think what I might be speaking for everyone in the room or just myself, but I am very interested in knowing what is the conversion rate between, from the trainings that you're providing to these young people actually getting into decent jobs.
Well, not as good as we'd want it to be at the moment, but part of the work we've been doing is with employers. So for example, in Kenya, we work with Safaricom, which is the largest telecommunications company in Kenya, and they have provided 50-something paid internships to job seekers with disabilities. Let me repeat, paid internships, paid. Because as much as unpaid internships give that opportunity, a youth with disability has additional cost to them being able to come to work. If they have a wheelchair, they're probably not going to have an easy time using a public transportation. They need private, transportation. That's an additional cost on top of that an employer is not necessarily meeting. You need to pay people for them to be able to thrive in their workplaces. So Safaricom has provided 50-something paid internships, and out of those 50-something, 34 thereabout have transitioned to jobs, not just in Safaricom but elsewhere. Some of the jobs they have transitioned into is security analyst, junior security analyst, ICT support, internal organizational ICT support. Some of them are now training other people within the ecosystem that we have created in cybersecurity and such like programs. So those are the type of jobs that young people are transitioning to, and we want to see that transition grow, but we have to build on that work. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I think this takes me to our next question and our next panelist. So just building on to what Sarah just discussed, as much as there's initiatives such as initiatives by site savers, trying to support young people transition from school to work. These are very impressive numbers, very impressive strategies that are being undertaken. However, just like Sarah mentioned, we are not seeing the conversion rate as high as we want it to be. Yeah. So, Abiodun.
Yes.
Based on your experience, again, working at your organization, yeah? So Special Needs Initiative for Growth. What insights can you provide regarding the challenges or fears that organizations or employers have that are preventing them from actually including young people with disabilities within their organizations, considering initiatives like that Site Savers is having are actually ongoing, and I believe it's not just Site Savers, making sure it's very easy for employers to incorporate policies that enable them recruit young people. What do you think their fears?
Okay, thank you so much for this opportunity. I would like to say that organizations and employers of labor have fears broken down into 3 categories. And the first one is the fear of incompetency, and this is due to lack of trust. many organizations and employers of labor have not been able to trust that persons with disability can actually do those things that they think is involved in the workspace. Yes, and then the second one is, the fear of impossibility due to lack of the knowledge. Many of the organizations and employers of labor don't know. They actually don't know that persons with disability have started breaking grounds in segments like cybersecurity, as you mentioned, analysts, digital marketing, and all sorts of industries. They don't know yet. And then the third one is the lack of knowledge on tools that would make this works possible. So even when they are willing to employ persons with disability, they are not aware of the tools, the accessibility equipment that they would use or they would give or provide for persons with disability that will make the workplace very, very effective and efficient for them. So those are the three basic and main challenges that employers of labor have when they come to employing persons with disability. And that's why organizations like ours, like Special Needs Initiative for Growth, we've gone a step higher through the programs that we're having to create a disability employment manual. So this is like a manual, a guideline, a document that would show and that employers of labor can integrate in their organizations that would make the transition from a no accessibility or inclusive organization into a full accessibility organization very, very possible. With the application of our manual that we've tested out, we have seen that organizations that employ it have been able to integrate persons with disability into their company with relative ease. And these persons with disability have been able to be effective and efficient in their job. Yes, so thank you.
Thank you so much. So while Amdi was giving us a narrative, I know he did mention some technologies that could be incorporated by organizations. And I must confess, the only technology I knew was JAWS. And the reason why I know it is because it's the only one that I think one of the organizations we worked with mentioned. And unfortunately, it's very expensive. So, and I know it's, I think, the only technology that organizations know. And the reason why they shy away from that is because of the price. So I'm just going to ask Abiodun one more time to list out some other technologies that employers could actually partake of that are not as expensive as JAWS, that are actually free.
All right. So I'll first of all start from the visual impairment sector. Just like JAWS, that is a screen reader, and as you said, it's quite expensive. But there are options like NVDA, that means non-visual desktop access. It does exactly what JAWS does, and a person with disability, specifically a visually impaired person working, will be able to use that in their job spaces. Also, there are tools like the Google Talkback. For Apple, I think there is an app called Windows Eye that does it as well. So if we move to other disabilities like an hearing impaired person, we have closed caption. We've got this tool by Google as well that helps you live transcribe. People are talking around you and it's picking it right out and giving it back to you in order for you to be able to communicate. So, and it is free. All the tools that I've mentioned right now, they are all free and usable. Yes. So many and many more of this, that more than I can list on this panel, they are available. Once the employers of labor acquire from us, we are able to provide this information and help the integration into an inclusive organization possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I believe we all at least now know one or two technologies that, even if you're not going to use that, you can always recommend it to either your fellow employers or any other organization that might find this valuable. So Abiodun, just one more question in 1 minute. Could you just tell us what you think we can do to enable youth access opportunities related to artificial intelligence and the industrial revolution right now, in 1 minute?
Yes, thank you. Artificial intelligence is everywhere now. Wherever you look, it is here, it is there, it is everywhere. Now, for a person with disability, artificial intelligence makes life much more easier. in the sense that it gives you more opportunity to explore all the other industries. Places where we would normally find difficult, artificial intelligence is going to help in, making those places penetratable. Yes, and what we can do to make this very, very usable for persons with disabilities, to teach them how to use artificial intelligence. The tools are available. We've got ChatGPT and other, effective tools that can be used. And we know that it can be abused. We know that people that use it in the wrong way. So that is why we're coming in to make these tools well taught, well used, and, so that efficiency can be gotten. Persons with disability can use accessibility tools that are AI integrated and do work better. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. So I think I will go right to Mr. Gabriel. You'll start by introducing yourself briefly and what your organization does. And right after that, I would love for you to just answer one of our questions, which is, from your experience, of course, working with BUG, what work is currently being done in your fields, especially, and how effective have those efforts been, especially in the field of digital inclusion, but for young persons with disabilities?
Thank you very much. My name is Gabriel. I'm originally from Sweden, but I've been living in Rwanda here for the last 8 years now. I'm one of the co-founders of an organization called BAG, standing for Building a Generation. It's a for-profit company based here in Kigali since 2017. We started BAG as an initiative to solve the unemployability and the readiness of the university student and the high school student to the job market. And through this initiative, we grew into an edtech platform here in Rwanda that supports youth with disabilities, but also high school students, high school graduates, and university students in gaining experience online with local employers. So what we do as a platform is that we simulate experience in every sector, both text-based, video-based, audio recorded-based, and USSD-based. We have created 4 different platforms where we support students and graduates to gain experience relevant to their sector of studies. In Rwanda, we've had over 150,000 unique users. Specifically when it comes to youth with disabilities, we've created a voice-recorded platform which enables youth outside in the rural areas who doesn't have smartphones or laptops to access voice-recorded content that helps them gain experience with local employers, and also gives them the ability to interact with the content through choosing different numbers on their feature phone, completely free, where they just dial *845 and then hashtag. They can access all our content, more than 12 hours of content in different sectors. And that's what we do as a company. It's an edtech startup. We sell a subscription model to universities, and we sell an HR tool to businesses. And what we do through this is that we enable youth with disabilities, specifically what we're mentioning, youth who do not have the ability to go to a workplace. Through our platform, they can go through a real-life internship and experiences through the platform, which is also enables youth with certain disabilities to also access it on the web application. We are using artificial intelligence and gamification to be able to personalize our feedback so that each student on scale can get personalized feedback as if the employer is talking to that student, without the employer having to respond to every user that we have. And as I mentioned, on this platform here in Rwanda, we have over 150,000 users who's been accessing this. Specifically the numbers on youth with disabilities, the problem we've had with working with youth with disabilities is that the initiatives that we've gotten to us is that organizations normally come and say, we want you to create a program for youth with disabilities. And for us as a private sector company who creates a lot of learning content, our first question is, okay, which disabilities are we talking about? And the majority of the time, they lump it into, yeah, it's going to be 300 people with different type of disabilities. We're going to do the recruitment, and then you're going to give us a solution. For example, we're doing one with MasterCard Foundation right now, and we're telling them that we cannot create anything without you telling us what are the disabilities we're talking about. And then in the end, it turned out that the majority of the disabilities had no impact on them using our online web application. So we basically, for 90% of the users, didn't have to change anything. And then we had to take the 10% and create an offline custom-made program. But it's a very big problem for a private sector company, which in my opinion has most oftenly maybe a more scalable solution to this problem, is that the communication we get to us on how to tackle this problem is rarely good enough. So that's what we do with youth with disabilities. Thank you.
Impressive. I must say that's very impressive. And you did hint a bit on scalability. Yeah, so based on your experience again, what do you think are some of the best practices, especially in working with young people, that could possibly be scaled up? I know you have highlighted the challenges. However, we do believe possibly there could be some best practices that could be scaled up.
I mean, since I know there's mostly non-profits in the room, I would say that we've been here for 7 years, and we've started with a team of 2. We're a team of 30 today, and we have organizations here in Rwanda who has the $20–30 million to work specifically what we're doing as well, which is job readiness skills for youth here in Rwanda, who have impacted maybe 5–10,000 people over the last 5 years, whereas we've been able to impact directly and gather analytics on over 150,000 youth in the country by enabling the technologies and by enabling artificial intelligence. We've been able to personalize the feedback and personalize our experiences to each individual using our platform. So if you just want to visualize it, you can imagine something like a LinkedIn tool, but every company you visit on their profile, you'd be able to engage, you'd be able to get responses from the company, and you'd be able to have a much more interactive experience with that company. So my recommendation when it comes to scale is definitely partnering with a for-profit company. In many ways, specifically tech-enabled startups here in Africa. We've seen that many times, that a tech startup here in Rwanda with $10,000 can do 10 times more than a massive NGO with $10 million. Just because they're working with the future technologies, whereas the NGO is working with past technologies.
Thank you for that. I love the fact that you have emphasized collaboration. Yeah, that's very key, and that's one of the reasons why we are here today, to just talk about the different possibilities, and collaboration is actually one of them. So for now, I just would love to invite you to give a round of applause to our panelists for now. Yes, so I just want to thank you. We have heard from 4 panelists who all represent Africa. So I'm just going to ask anyone in the audience who is outside Africa that has anything to add on to what our panelists have said in regards to digital inclusion, especially with people with disabilities, young people with disabilities. Anyone from outside Africa? Within Africa? Everyone is within Africa? Yes. Yes, thank you.
So yeah, my name is Lena, and I work at International Labour Organization. I think you have seen me in the past days, and I'm from China, by the way, and China is a massive country, and we have more than 1 billion of persons living with disability in China. And I used to work for a company in China. We provide a consulting service to major IT tech companies for ensuring that the technologies they develop are accessible. This is very important. For example, when you use Uber or you use Taobao, in China it's Taobao, Alibaba. So you need to, for example, visually impaired youth, to make them independent in life, they need to be able to access these kind of technologies. It's regarding the daily life, but it's also very important for the work scenario. For example, the products of Microsoft, they are mostly accessible, and it's very important. So these kind of major main tools that we use in work, they are accessible. But in addition, all the digital technologies we have in daily life, like Uber, should be accessible to allow that mobility of youth with disabilities. And I think the company has reached a lot of success because we have been able to work with major IT companies in China and have been driven this kind of movement to create alliance in China of corporate partners in order to promote the importance of accessibility and even to influence the policy making in China. So now the first time we have some of specific regulations or policies that ensure the technology of government websites should be accessible for persons with disabilities. So I think indeed it's very important to work with very major and powerful tech partners like for-profit organizations, and to, of course, drive the awareness and inclusion in terms of understanding that young people with disabilities, they should be able to achieve their aspirations without just being defined as, okay, you anyway, it's not for you, this kind of technology, because it's too complicated. It's not the problem of the disability itself, but rather the problem of the technology, which is disabled. So that's my view.
Thank you so much, Lena. Yes. So we must all agree that this is not just an African problem, you know, it is a global initiative. So we all need to come together, collaborate, and make sure that we are actually achieving the objectives that we need to achieve. So the reason I'm standing up is because I am going to just welcome 2 questions because of time. Just 2 questions to our panelists, and then, yeah, to anyone or all of them, you can decide, but just 2 questions from the audience. Wow, that was fast. That was fast. Okay, I'll start with Mary.
Thank you so much. My name is Mary. So my question is more of based on the incentives, especially for when it comes to, when we talk of jobs, we are talking about the private sector. They're the biggest employers in the market. And when we talk about some of the tools we are having, we are setting out in the market, like Lena, you shared in terms of how it was rolled out, even from the you know, working with big tech companies to roll out some of this institution. So my question is based on what sort of business case are we using? Because in my work, I work in the job space, and it's more for targeting people with disability. And one thing we are facing when it comes to the private sector, approaching it from a humanitarian point of view, they do not understand. That's a language they do not understand. But from a business case point of view, which is there, so many studies about the business case of working with people with disability. So I would like to hear a little bit of, especially from the tools perspective, the tools that are rolling out there, and maybe Lena also can, Lena can also share a little bit of what business case did they use to motivate like the big tech companies to come into the parade, and how do they find benefit in that? Perhaps you can borrow ideas.
First of all, for business, the case is people with disabilities are not burden, but they are users. So if you neglect them, neglect their needs, you neglect 1 billion of users in China. You can make profits from these people because they, for example, they need insurance, right? As persons with disability, if the website or app which you use to sell the insurance, it doesn't work for Abiodun, for example, he will not buy it because he doesn't understand anything. So it's considered as customers for the company. First is that, and the second for corporate social responsibility, of course, because it's a very good opportunity to promote that the technology you are developing is promoting equality and inclusion in a society, and you can make stories of how the technology has empowered the life of people with disabilities, providing them with the skills and the job to make them be part of the society. And so this is what they usually like. I think these 2 cases, first is for the profit, and the second for the image of the company.
Yes, Sarah?
Also, just to add, in terms of the business case from our experience working with employers, is the more amongst their staff, the more they do disability. The more they do disability awareness training and such, the more the staff who already have disabilities within the organization disclose that they have a disability, and the better they are accommodated. And it leads to increased productivity. It enables the employer to reach the best talent, because if your recruitment processes allow different people with different abilities to be able to apply, then you really are going to get everyone who is interested applying, and you're likely to attract diverse and good talent. And by having people with disabilities within your organizations, whatever solutions, services, or products that you're creating will have individuals with disabilities who probably interface with those products, contributing to the solutions that you're developing for, for your market. So whatever it is that you're producing has in mind that client with a disability, or that family that has a client with a disability. So again, talking about market reach, it ensures that your market reach is expanded. Let me just read something very quickly from Accenture, from a research they did, where they compared hundreds of companies, some of which were disability champions and others were not disability champions. And within that, they found that those ones who were disability champions had a 28% more revenue in comparison to those that were not. And their profit margins were 30% higher than the companies that were not disability inclusive. And you can reach out to me, and I'm happy to share that research. And there is even more by the International Labour Organization on the disability inclusion advantage that is very convincing on the business case for disability inclusion. Happy to share this. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much, Sarah and Lena, for responding to that. I hope your question has been extensively responded to. Yes, let me have the next question.
All right, thank you. I'm Shanita Birungi. I come from Uganda. Having heard from you all, I still agree, I think, with the rest of the comrades that disability is not inability. This is such an exciting opportunity, because at least I know for the last 8 years, I've been a trade unionist and I've been a youth chairperson. I remember joining the trade union, we didn't have a committee. We only had committees for the youth and women. But then around the survey we did, we got to find out that we have workers who have disabilities. One, I want to understand which disability are we talking about, like Mr. Gabriel was talking about. Are we only talking about the disability with a sight? Because most of the young workers, I work in the informal sector, I'm a taxi driver, and we have people who get these disabilities on job. So when we are looking at opportunities, are we only looking at the people with the sights? Because we have people who are really capable of doing, who are drivers but get accidents. I was a tout. I don't know if you all understand by a tout. I was once a tout, but then I upgraded to being a taxi driver. But being a tout, there are these people who get accidents and are not can't drive as of now. But now we are transforming to driverless cars, which are digital. How can we be helped, or how can we access these opportunities? I would agree with my brother. He talked about employers. As trade unions, we all know when we're on the round table with employers, we are always at loggerheads, always fighting for the workers' rights. Yes, when we actually realize that the people, the young people with disabilities, they already have the solutions. But when they come to us as trade unions, we don't have the solutions. I had no idea that in Uganda there is even any organization where we can seek for advice to help these youths or people with disabilities. Yesterday during the panel discussion, I shared that we have a youth camp. Last year we had one. We began with 2018, which had 120 people. After COVID-19, with a mental health that really affected the youth, last year we were over 360 and realized most of them had disabilities. But when it comes to skilling, trust me, even me as a person, I had no idea of how to help them. So I think it's really important if we really get these opportunities, and we can, you make it easier for us to access you. Because employers really, when we are on these round tables fighting, they win us because of this. They know we have no ideas on how we can help these people with disabilities, and that's how we lose out with our young workers at the workplaces.
Yes.
Thank you.
So, sorry, just one, Ms. Birungi, could you just repeat your question one more time, and is it directed to Mr. Gabriel?
The definition of disability, because when I heard him say, he only talked about, my concern like was with only the sight, okay, but not the other disability on job.
Over to you.
Yeah, so the definition of, you mean how we define each disability to custom make the programs? I mean, it always ends up with us having to actually do the research ourselves, meaning we get a list of 100 participants for a program, and we then have to send someone to figure out exactly what type of disability it is, if it's something we have to solve with a hardware issue, with a tech platform, or if it's something we have to do offline, and then tag the participants so that we then can create a program. And that's how we do our definition of youth with disabilities. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, seems everyone wants to answer this question. 1 minute for Abiodun, 1 minute for Sarah. I know you also wanted to answer. Yes.
Okay. To add to what Mr. Gabriel has said, disability is a very wide concept. There are various ways, but anyone that is unable to do things the way that, quote unquote, a normal person would do it, anyone that would require something extra to get normal job done is a person with disability. There are degrees to it. There is a high disability rate. There is a low disability rate. But still, it is still a disability. And these persons with disability are there. Person with sickle cell, for example, is a person with disability, and in Nigeria where we are, we consider them as such. So they are also entitled to advantages that persons with disability enjoy. And then for the other question about how organizations can benefit or can employ persons with disability with ease. This is why collaboration is important. Like in Nigeria, for example, we have companies like MTN supporting persons with disability that get employment. As long as you're able to secure an employment, MTN will support you with an accessibility tool that will make it easy for you. I have a friend that was supported by PwC, and they bought the JAWS for $700 the moment she was able to secure the employment. So there are organizations that will be willing to support as long as you as an organization is willing to employ the person with disability. So we need to collaborate more. That is really, really, really the important thing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, I'm going to just have only one response. Ms. Birunji, I am from Uganda. We can meet, and I'll give you a list of organizations that support persons with disability as well. Sarah is from Site Savers. That's one of the organizations, but we'll talk about that. So as we conclude, I have just 2 questions for each of my panelists. Yeah. So the first question is around, it's actually not a question, one question, and then I would ask them to give us a call to action. Sarah will give a call to action to employers. Daniel will give a call to action to OPDs, that's Organizations for Persons with Disabilities. Abiodun is going to give a call to action for young people, especially young people with disabilities. And then Gabriel, you are going to give a call to action to, I think, CIVO, was it CIVO? Yeah, CIVO, like civil society, basically. Yes, but before you do that, I would love for each of you to just answer one question in 1 or 2 minutes. So what specific strategies or programs do you believe the global initiative on decent jobs for youth should prioritize or expand upon to better support young persons with disabilities, particularly in regions or sectors with significant youth employment challenges? So anyone can start that. You can respond to the question, then give the call to action to the specific stakeholder category. Yes, I've done.
All right. I would like to first of all appreciate International Labour Organization, because the strategy that I would advise them to employ is actually something that I am benefiting from right now. My ability to participate in this program is a very good step in the right direction, because me being here I'm able to communicate from the perspective of a person with disability. So this is what I would advise, that more of this should be done. There are so many talents, persons with disability, not just visually impaired persons, people with autism, people with Down syndrome, people, they need to get involved in programs like this. They need to be able to socialize with the common, the environment of common living. They need to be in spaces where they can feel like, yes, everything is normal. Everything is usual. Everything is formal. They need to be, socially involved in programs like this. It goes a long way, to ensure that inclusivity is achieved. And that's why my call to action will be to persons with disability themselves, that nothing is given freely, including inclusion. So we as persons with disability, we must make ourselves talented enough, efficient enough, effective enough, so that the organizations and the employers of labor that want to employ us will find us valuable, usable, and workable with. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So for the rest of the panelists, let's just use between 30 to 45 seconds.
Okay.
You.
Okay.
Maybe call to action, yes.
Yeah, because he did say what I was going to say anyway. So my call to action is to employers, and I think the biggest thing to do is to have people with disabilities in the room and to have conversations with them, because that's the only way to know what it is that you need to change. So engage with people with disabilities, engage with organizations of persons with disabilities, engage with departments of government that support people with disabilities, and disability organizations such as Sight Savers. And then we can have collaborative discussions of what needs to change. And with the realization that disability inclusion is not a single, it cannot be achieved in a short time, it's an entire journey. And most importantly, please think about the inclusion of women with disabilities because of the triple intersection of the challenges that they face in the work that we do. I know we didn't get to talk about that today.
That's, I think, for the next, I think one of the initiatives that ILO can take on. Yes. Yes, Daniel.
Merci beaucoup. Je fais appel d'abord à des personnes handicapées soi-même de pouvoir renforcer de la plaidoyer. Je fais appel aussi à des gouvernements. En ce sens, tous les États, je dirais presque tous les États de l'Afrique ont ratifié cette convention internationale des personnes avec handicap. Mais les États, même s'ils l'ont ratifié, mais ne l'adoptent pas dans leurs lois nationaux. Même s'ils l'adoptent, ne les met pas en pratique. Donc, je dirais, j'appelle à des gouvernements de pouvoir renforcer cette vigueur, cette mise en vigueur des lois à l'égard des personnes handicapées. Et puis, je fais appel à des communautés, à la société en général, de pouvoir comprendre la personne avec handicap. Merci.
Okay, thank you. 30 seconds. Yes.
Call to action for civil society. Yes. In my experience, what I've seen with NGOs and nonprofits in Rwanda, are that the smaller they are, with the lesser money they have, the more impact they can do with a lesser amount of money. Because their focus is not, they don't get $10 million from one organization to do one specific mandate, but they have normally more like-minded entrepreneur leading that organization, starting from their own passion project. And their ability to do good impact is, in my opinion, from what I've seen, greater than the large organizations that are driven a lot by bureaucracy and having to follow where basically the money has its mandates. So in my opinion, from civil society, I would say involve private sector into your operation, hire not the traditional hiring process of people who have the right experience 20 years back, but rather hire an entrepreneur who is solving a problem in that sector, and you'll see a massive difference in your project that you're implementing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's just give a round of applause to our panelists as we close this session. I'm going to invite Mary to just direct us to our next sessions. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. It's me again. So
I was looking for a job, and
the first
I saw one
parallel session, as you
advertised
can see on the
online.
agenda,
At the end of
it's
the
happening
interview,
in
the
Kivu.
person
It's on
interviewing me
integrating
asked,
jobs
"Are you
and
sure
social
you can do
protection,
this job?" She made a
social protection
statement
policies.
saying,
So that will
"I saw
happen.
you when
It's-
you walked in."
I bet it
That
has
was when
already
it
started.
dawned on me
So for
that
those
she
who
was
want to join that,
referring
you
to my
better
disability.
be getting up. And the second one is on empowering the future, green jobs for youth, and just transition in Mutara in this room. So for those who are attending that, please stay in the room. And for Gasabo, which is downstairs, it's for green youth entrepreneurship, what works. That is a session that will happen in Gasabo. So let's meet there in negative 10 seconds. I would like to learn more about it because we're working not entirely on a space, but 2 year project working so it's those women which and we're still creating in that area. So when you mentioned about the platform, I want to see that. Okay, you will have to adapt. Yes, okay. I will talk to our moderator.
Inclusive workspaces.
Yes, we do. So maybe, or maybe we could, would that work?
I'm not quite sure. I think there was someone. Can you move them 20 centimeters?
Sorry, we just need for the banner.
Sorry, No. How many people?
That was quick. Annika, do you have more specific?
No, I haven't.
Yes, no, we don't. Okay.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. I can't hear you. Good morning. How are you? Are we fine or we are just fine? We are very fine. Okay. Thank you so much. So most welcome to this beautiful, wonderful, and most productive session we are going to have today. Everyone clap hand for yourself. So we are looking at the green jobs. But most of us have been thinking, how are we going to benefit from these green jobs? But you see, now we are looking at transitioning to green jobs in Africa. Now, in that transition period, it comes along with disrupting existing opportunities and job opportunities for young people. Then what is needed there is young people need to equip themselves, and young people, we need to equip ourselves with necessary skills to make sure that we get these opportunities and maximize what is there. So today's session will be learning from each other, interacting, and looking at the report on these decent jobs that have been provided, but also looking at cases on how different places have been implementing these procedures, and how are we going to take call to action as we together, so that after this session we can act. So I'm Gibson Kawago. I think you know what we do. So these are the green solutions that we provide, but also in return we help rural communities access clean energy. And in the beginning, we're going to have the Mentimeter. So let's get the code and scan. This is the, yeah, this is always technology. Technology is amazing. So let's see the Menti code. While waiting for the Menti code, I wanted to share with you something. You know, okay, so you can visit menti.com on your phones. Let's go to menti.com. Can we see the code? The technology part. Yeah. Let's do this. So number one is what comes in mind when you hear about a just transition in Africa? What comes in your mind? Thank you. Equality. So 1 is equal to 1. So that equal sign. Then yes. Leaving no one behind, that is inclusivity, meaning that each and every one of us needs to take part in it. Fairness, making sure that we're fair everywhere. Clarity, parity, yes. Environment, it's very important to know where we are, what is around. Equity, exactly. Nothing for us without us can be just. Yes, everyone. And green, yes, it's very important to see the green part. But there's one thing that has just happened here, and we've forgotten about it. In everything, we need technology. Because without technology too, we have technology is the one that connects all of us. And the last one? Yes? People. We are the ones who make everything happen as it is. Then the other one is, what do you see the main opportunities for youth? What are the main opportunities that are available for youth that you can see? Entrepreneurship. Jobs, exactly, jobs are these main opportunities. Skills building. Technology, exactly. Like now we see the evolution of AI is coming up. So as young people, it's an opportunity for us to get there. Innovations, exactly. Yes, it's because we come from different countries, different places, different cultures, and we share, unite, then we come up with something that is concrete. Space, exactly. Yes, because without policies, we might plan A and the policy doesn't support us. So it's important to make sure you consider that. Then the other one, what do you see as the main challenges for youths? Because in everything that happens, there are challenges that occur. So what are the main challenges in your experience? Let's go personal. Exploitation, yes. Accessibility. Sometimes it's difficult to access some stuff and not enough skills, and that is why we are here. And in the end, we will all come up with something. What skills do we need to have here so that we can use them later? Exactly.
Tokenism.
What?
Tokenism.
Tokenism? Tell us more.
So that youth are used to not really speak their own voice, but used for this dominant extractive narrative that's often associated with the transition.
Exactly. Yes. Funding. I think everything without money cannot happen. Yeah, we always run away like, no, we don't need money. But in real sense, we do need. Yes. Leaders. Aged. So, aged leaders. So it means... So they want to remain there because they were there. So for us young people, no matter how skilled we are, we might not get there because... Yes? Exactly. Sometimes you have the right skills at the wrong opportunity. Yes.
Impatience.
What?
Impatience.
Impatience. We are always forgetting about that. Yes, most of the times we want now. I want to have this skill and get this job now. But at the end of the day, even when you are applying for jobs, they ask you, you have experience for how long? So you needed to be patient to have that experience to have this. Even sometimes they want someone who has 5 years experience. So no matter how skilled you are, but you need to be patient to practice and practice and practice so that you can be able to make it. And now, when you want to drink wine, it's very important on how you open it. And it is advised you should not drink wine as the way you drink water. What are the procedures? After opening, you take your glass, you pour it in slowly, then you need to feel it. You like sniff, then you synchronize with your brain, then you drink. that is how you will enjoy the wine. And saying that, we are now going to get the opening words. Yes, from Mr. Paul Okwi, and he's going to tell us what are the findings that have been done and what are we going to get from this session, and from there we can have a clear beginning. Let's clap hands for him. Most welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. I don't know what part of the tasting of the wine I am, but I'm just here to break the ice, to set the tone in terms of where we are coming from with this initiative on decent jobs for the youth. So I'm Paul Okwi from the IDRC. IDRC is International Development Research Center. And where we are today is basically a result of an initial idea we conceived in around 2019 between the ILO, Include, and the IDRC. This was a partnership, and the partnership here was basically to help develop the soft skills of youth in the region, and also to help the youth acquire digital jobs. So there was kind of a challenge that we were facing in the region, and we wanted to support work-based learning. So we developed a number of projects within the region and included mentorship as part of this. And that's why I was saying impatience. Mentorship helps address issues of impatience. Otherwise, you want to become the president of your country tomorrow after graduating? No, it's not possible. So why did we do this? We actually realized that the youth face a number of hostilities, a number of inequalities and inadequate employment opportunities. They seem to be the marginalized, the youth and the women. And yet, we've been having the rhetoric about, skills mismatch, education that is not compliant with the needs of the community, industry demands that are not matching with the training. So this, together with the crisis that has been happening in the world, including the changes in technology, I call the change in technology a crisis as well, because it's opened both the opportunities and also created more problems. So we in Africa, for instance, are finding ourselves thinking like the advanced people in the US in terms of where the Industrial Revolution is. And yet in some parts of Africa, there are millions that have not even touched the phone, that even do not know what internet is. So should we be thinking like somebody in Canada? Should we be thinking different? So these kind of questions have put us into thinking about the future of work. What is the future of work in terms of our African youth? There is a dichotomy. There are youth who are actually in the modern sector, those who are graduating with degrees and the rest, but there are youth who are dropping out. And we tend to forget about those. They are not here, they're not represented here. Many of them cannot read and write. And there are more than those who can read and write. So it puts us into a dilemma. How do we address this challenge in terms of exposure of both categories of the youth? And that's why we went into deciding to conduct some reflections on what needs to be done. How do we create opportunities for the youth? And then the aspect of greening came in. How do we create these greener jobs? So yesterday we were asking ourselves, do we want jobs or do we want decent jobs? Yeah, in the context where I come from, which is deep somewhere in rural Uganda, I think we want jobs. Yeah, we won't put the food on the table, and then the next thing is think about the decency after. In the context where Syria and others come from, I think it's different. They are looking for decent jobs. So how do we arrive at a more compromising position between the two? So we thought about some key issues, and together with Include and ILO, we put out some highlights. The first one was the changing nature of jobs in the push for low carbon transition in the formal and in the informal sector. Now, there is quite a very fast-paced change in the sense that the world is talking about low carbon transition, clean energy, climate issues, but also we're talking about the nature of jobs that are changing. However, like I said, there are some areas that are still static in terms of the jobs that are there. That is agriculture, for instance. It's not like the technical sector. The second one is on the skills and training that are critical for the green transition. What kind of skills do we need? Somebody talked about the skills mismatch. What kind of training do we need in the universities? Yesterday, I remember somebody said, do away with all the courses that are not leading to job creation. Just shift. But it's also difficult because our education system was designed in a manner that prepares us more for the white-collar jobs and less for the type of jobs that are on demand today. So we want to see what kind of business models would be relevant to shift these processes in terms of inclusive processing. And then the other one is what sectors and occupations are really likely to play a critical role. In Africa, for instance, what sectors will employ more youth? We still know it's agriculture. This is where many of these people are. Today, politicians are talking about border. That's the transport sector. But how many are going there? They're really still not a very big number. So we need to think more big picture than the current trends that we're looking at. And then we also want to put together some models that can help us develop some value chains that can employ the youth from, if it is agriculture, let's go into processing and value addition, so that the youth are not just in the farms, but they're in the process of marketing, processing, and then also selling. So Include here is going to give us some interesting work that they have done in terms of responding to some of these issues, and we will hear from them shortly. And the last bit is, I think we're graced with the presence of the High Commissioner, Julie, who is going to be one of our panelists, and she's going to tell us really what her experience is in terms of working, in terms of evidence-based policy processes, and also the interest of the government of Canada on this very important subject. So we are going to listen to Include, but also open up for interactions, just to know what are some of the learnings that we can get from these issues, and what's the way forward for Africa. And yes, let me stop there and wish ourselves some very fruitful deliberations. To crown it, I was in Kigali 10 years ago talking about youth employment. When I reflect, I think nothing has changed much. We're asking the same questions. So maybe at that time there was no digitization. It wasn't as serious. Maybe it's digitization that has changed much. But in terms of the skills mismatch, the nature of the training and all that, I think not much is changing. So it puts a bigger question to us. Are we doing the right thing? Are we answering the wrong questions? And the youth are actually transitioning. Tomorrow, my colleague here will be on our side. And the youth at that time will be asking the same questions that is asking us today. So we don't want that to happen at that time. We need to look at it in a different perspective. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yes, let's clap hands. And if I can pick something, if we forget everything, it's very important to remember what do we want to tap from the opportunities that we see. And I've heard Mr. Paul said, like looking at the agriculture area this time, if we look at many opportunities that exist in all countries, in agriculture is where we see almost all countries we do that. So we can look at what opportunities and what skills do we need to get there. Now, you know, if you speak of something without doing a research, sometimes it might be difficult to have a just conversation. So we are going to hear out more on the research that has been done, and we're going to get the presentation from Siri from the Include Knowledge platform. Let's clap hands for her.
Yes, hi everyone, and thanks so much Gibson and also Paul for that great introduction. I think it's too late to say good morning, good afternoon everyone. And yeah, thank you. And I couldn't agree more with Paul. Like, why are we still asking the same questions? Well, hopefully, on a more positive note, hopefully we can provide some new answers also today and also together to re-ask those questions and to provide some new insights from emerging knowledge on opportunities for youth in just transitions. Yeah, so as Gibson said, my name is Siri. I'm a knowledge manager at the Include Knowledge platform. And for those of you who don't know who we are, we're an independent knowledge platform initiated by the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 2012. And we have 3 pillars. That's research, knowledge exchange, and policy dialogue. And through these 3 pillars, we provide evidence-based policy making on inclusive development in Africa. And the core of our platform are our platform members, the majority of which are from the African continent as well. Yes, and youth employment, and especially decent work in Africa, has been one of our key focus points. And together with IDRC and ILO as long-standing partners, we're looking for the opportunities for youth in Africa, and specifically also in the future of work, the green and digital economies. And it is in this context that we did research on the opportunities for youth in a low-carbon transition. So, and I'm gonna, yes, please, next slide. Yes, so we did this in 3 parts. So we did a literature review to really have the emerging knowledge from literature, both grey and academic literature, but we also contextualized these findings together with researchers from Africa, so from Nigeria and South Africa. We did a case study on what a just transition looks like in policy and practice. And then finally, we organized and facilitated multi-stakeholder dialogues, both in Abuja in Nigeria and in South Africa, to which we invited key system players in the energy space. So that's knowledge institutes, policymakers, industry leaders, civil society organizations, but most importantly for me, also youth networks, youth representatives, and really try to even the playing field about having that youth engagement in policy discussions. Yes, so, and I will go over this quickly because many of you might already know what a low carbon transition is, but just basically it's the process by which a country changes from both using high carbon energy and low carbon energy to just using low carbon energy sources. And what we found, both in the literature review, but also in our interactions, is that this basic definition is not really that relevant for Africa. It's very focused on this northern conceptualization of net zero pathways, energy efficiency in terms of production and consumption. But if we look at the African continent, we see that the energy landscape and the development landscape is radically different. So we should have this different conceptualization. Still, more than half of the population does not even have access to affordable and reliable electricity. I live in South Africa, in Cape Town, and for those of you who also live in South Africa, I don't need to tell you that even those who have regular access to electricity due to load shedding, we also don't have it, up to 8 hours a day. Shamila knows what I'm talking about. But also, Africa is facing demographic challenges in terms of mass urbanization, industrialization, and of course, why we're all here, the youth bulge in search for work. And then finally, when we talk about a low carbon transition, we can't really talk about the minerals that are also needed to facilitate that transition. And without putting in the right checks and balances, the low carbon transition can become another scramble for Africa's resources if we're not conscious about how we implement this transition. So what we concluded is that there is really a need for a strong African vision that's also inclusive and, most importantly here, youth-centered. Yes. So in this context, the concept of a just transition emerges. And many of you may know the term already. So a just transition is greening the economy in a way that is as inclusive as possible by creating decent work and ensuring that no one is left behind in the process. And this all sounds nice, and nobody would disagree with this. However, when we look in practice, we still see that there is no consensus about what this justice actually is, how it should be realized, and for whom it should be enacted. And this is really what we wanted to find out. So from a youth perspective, the vantage point of youth, marginalized communities, also women, what does it mean, a just transition? And what are some of the opportunities emerging from that? But also, very importantly, what are some of the challenges and systemic barriers that prevent young people from actually reaping the benefits of a just and green economy?
So this is what we looked at. And luckily I can skip over this slide because many of you know it and we've been discussing it for the last 1.5 days already in terms of green jobs opportunity that are both direct, indirect, but also induced, resulting from a just transition process. And these are in the clean, oh, no, I'm not completely skipping it. Because it is very important. There are so many opportunities. I just don't need to reiterate every point. So in the clean energy sector, the extractive sector, also of course mining for minerals. Again, be mindful of not scrambling for Africa, but doing it in a partnership way. And then of course green entrepreneurship, to which many of you, most notably Gibson of course, our moderator, is a testament. And finally, something I do want to stress is that in the research we also see a lot of opportunities arising in the informal economy, which is often left outside of the scope of research because it's not deemed decent. And yes, of course, there are many challenges, but for the foreseeable future, many of Africa's economies are still experiencing, are still having a very large informal economy. So this is also where there will be some opportunities. Think about circular economy models of waste recycling. Think about smart agriculture. Think about all those opportunities that young people can grab, sometimes even next to their formal jobs. So, all great, many opportunities, hooray. However, what we also see is that the transition won't be a smooth process. It will be very disruptive, and at the same time that we're gaining jobs, there will also be a lot of job losses that happen through a process of low carbon transition, and many new challenges will arise. Yes, so, and I just want to highlight some of these, and more of these you can find in the full report, but just with examples from the case studies that we did, or my colleagues from Africa did, on just transition processes in South Africa, but also Nigeria. And one of the things that we see in South Africa is that the country has a high dependency on coal. So one of the key priority objectives is really to move away from coal by decommissioning coal mines and investing in more renewable energy. However, in South Africa, a lot of the coal mines and the employment in coal mines is highly localized to one province. Shamila? Mpumalanga. So 80% of the coal comes from one single province in South Africa, Mpumalanga. However, the new jobs that will be created will mostly be in wind, solar, green hydrogen in the Northern Cape. Well, for someone coming from Holland, it doesn't seem like much the other side of the country, but in South Africa it is. It's very far. So the jobs that will be lost on one side of the country may be created at another side, but won't be accessible for those same communities. So there's a large spatial inequity concern that's happening. Also, in this transition process, a lot of those new jobs will only materialize in 2037 in South Africa. Well, the decommissioning is already happening now. So what are people supposed to do for the next 10 years? Wait? Move, maybe. Build their skills, but still, we see that there's also this timeline and temporal inequity issue. And finally, what we also see is because it's highly unionized, the mining sector, people actually have quite a decent wage. They have good negotiations, they have long-term employment, even when they have low-level educations. However, for the renewable energy space, higher levels of skills are needed. And often, a lot of the jobs that are created are only at the beginning stage of a project, so in the construction phase. So there's a real concern about the quality, but also the sustainability of these new green jobs that we are counting. So there, of course, the skills mismatch is also an issue, especially the people moving away from these brown and smokestack industries. How are they going to find the connection to this new renewable energy, which often needs, especially for the higher paid job, higher skills as well? And what we saw in Nigeria is that an added concern is also ownership issues. A lot of the renewable energy industries in Nigeria are foreign owned, and there's often quite a high stake or connection with the government. So corruption, elite capture is also an issue here. So, and of course also the gender disparities. I think we talked about that a lot over these past 1.5 days as well, that even though women are very well placed to take up these new green jobs, often they do find themselves at a disadvantage in these new jobs. Childcare burden, also social norms, stigmas, but also a lack of access to some of the education, STEM education or TVET institutions. And finally, which for me is a very important point and an overarching point, is that it's, and this came out strongly for me during the multi-stakeholder dialogues, is that up until now the process has been very non-inclusive. Because even though youth have been invited to speak, they have been invited to some of these policy discussions, they often feel tokenized. So their voices are being used to reaffirm an often still dominant extractive narrative and a Western-dominated narrative about the low-carbon transition, without actually asking them what it is that you need. What are your challenges? How should we respond to your needs and your skills and your barriers that you are facing? So the conclusion here is yes, a low-carbon transition can bring many opportunities. However, if we don't manage it well and we don't put in the proper safeguards, we actually risk repeating the same patterns of dispossession and exclusion that we are seeing in the fossil fuel-based economy. Hence, and it's not going to be a downer, this presentation, because hence we need a youth-centered just transition. So as included, together with IDRC, we formulated some pathways. You can find them on the flyers that you saw on the seat. So I don't want to go into all of them because you can read them on our website, but I just want to highlight two, which I think in the context of this conference are very important. And the first one, are addressing the skills mismatch. And we heard a lot about this. And also in research, it comes up again and again. And TVET is often mentioned as one of the gateways. It's one of the ways of bridging that gap between the skills that industry leaders need and the skills that young people have. However, what we also see is that there are still many challenges in the TVET space. In terms of perception, not all African youth is very happy to engage in TVET, as most of you know. It's not seen as the best form of education, but also in a lack of funding, a lack of knowledge of some of the teachers, and also lack of the really updated renewable energy technologies. So if we want to see TVET as an important, integral part of bridging the skills mismatch, which it is, then we should properly invest in TVET, both in the capacity building side of teachers, trainers, but also in really having this more comprehensive overview of what are the skills that are actually needed. And that's why I was very happy with the session this morning that also alluded to the importance of soft skills, also foundational skills, digital skills. They're all part of the package because we're not just training people for the jobs of today. We're training people for the jobs of tomorrow, the day after. We don't talk about green jobs, we talk about green careers. And this is why we need to really invest in those transversal skills that young people need, that equip them for the future of work. All right, and then the second one, meaningful youth engagement. And this seems like an open door. We've heard so much about it already. Again, I think no one would disagree. However, what does meaningful mean? Meaningful means not just inviting a youth because they are youth. It means inviting different voices to the space. It's about representation. It's really about having those different voices influencing the policy discourse. It's also about people going against the current stream and listening to them. What is hampering them? It's about youth heterogeneity, intersectionality. All of these issues need to be taken into account when you talk about youth engagement. So when we talk about youth engagement, it's really also to reframe the message from a youth perspective. Not just have youth as a tick-the-box exercise, but what is their story about a just transition? And if we do that, I truly believe that we can have youth, not as an afterthought in this whole process, but really as the driving force of a greener and more inclusive future. And on that note, I'd like to hand back to our youth moderator. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much, Siri. What we can do, can we take a picture of this QR code, or we can scan so that we can access the entire report? The same, yeah.
Yes, it's also on this one.
It's also there, yeah. So where are we now? We started by opening the wine.
Oh, yes. What am I then? The wine.
Then after the wine, we deep dived into the research to see what research has been done and what have we found out. But you know, knowing how to do and doing, we think they're this close, but they're this far. Because you might think you know how to do, but you can't do it. So with that saying, we would like to deep dive in what is practically done in South Africa. And I would like to welcome Miss Shamila. Yes. Ah, okay, yes.
So maybe we can first have a reflection, if that's okay.
Yeah, surely.
And then yes, and then after we do the interview with Shamila, if that's okay. Just
Yeah, that's very okay. Thank you so much. So with that, with respect, I would like to welcome Miss Julie, the High Commissioner for Canada in the Republic of Rwanda, for panel discussion. Most welcome. Let's clap hands for her. And I would like also to welcome Mr. Jurian, who will have a panel discussion and see what are the reflections we have for this session. So, most welcome. Yes, number one, what are the key takeaways for this session? Welcome.
Thank you so much, and a very good afternoon to you all. It's a pleasure to be here. The key takeaways for me has been actually very reassuring, because we started the session by saying what we think just transition is about, and all those key words are actually heavily aligned with how Canada is approaching this issue. So in terms of a validation, for me it's extremely valuable to have this feedback and have the chance to go deeper through this research that's been taking place and others that are ongoing. So I feel that there's a real alignment. So for me, it's a key takeaway. Another element, of course, is that there's a wide diversity of situations. We focused on the need for a specific vision for Africa. It's probably the same for other continents, and we should probably narrow it down even further and go local and try to find solutions that are truly adapted to the Sure. So having that very specialized type of approach will most certainly be more impactful ultimately. And then a third takeaway for me, and Paul mentioned it in the beginning, these questions are not new necessarily. We've been asking ourselves, what are we going to do? There's a youth bulge, there's a crisis in terms of climate change, and we need to develop the economy further to create employment. And we want all of that to match and to give us a better future. But even though we've been asking ourselves those questions, maybe now we've reached a stage where there is a momentum, where there is a stronger engagement, or maybe a new way of engaging the key stakeholders. And by that, I think about the youth. So they have to be at the center of the decision making. They have to be part of those decision-making processes. And Canada has had that approach. So in terms of recognizing the importance of the leadership of young people, women in particular, and making sure that there is a real match in terms of the skills, and by that having projects that will be focusing on TVET, on skills training, overall on education that will be aligned with the needs of that green-blue economy that we want to create, and have these kinds of projects. So we've been working closely with a lot of partners for that, including ILO, including UNICEF, including IDRC, of course. So these are my key takeaways.
Thank you so much. And what I take from that is, as I remember as we are transitioning to electric cars, most people raised that it's important, as you have said, to localize the solutions, because we might bring electric cars in a place with no supply of electricity. So it's also important to think down from that. And also, I would like to welcome Mr. Jurian also to tell us the main key takeaways from this session. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's always a risk as a moderator to hand away your mic. But first of all, thank you so much to Include and ILO for showing us with this very important research, or providing us with answers not only to the why and the what about a just transition and how to involve the opportunities for young people in it, but also answering the how for us. I think that is one of the most important added values of this important research. I think many of the they resonate, of course, very well with Dutch policies as well, in particular our Youth at Heart strategy, just highlighting some of our priorities: the job decency for youth, the addressing of the skills mismatch, the importance of contextualization and localization, gender justice, of course, and the promotion of it. And of course, indeed, you mentioned it, meaningful youth participation. I elaborated on that yesterday as well. What maybe it is good to emphasize that one thing that is also one of the conclusions, I'm not sure you mentioned it now in your presentation, but we need to realize that youth are not a homogeneous group. So we need to involve them because many of the solutions are always context specific. Some other important highlights I would like to stress is that transitions do not take place in a social or political vacuum. It is disruptive by nature and often influenced by political and economic interests. And when youth are not included politically, then transitions fulfill the interests of the elderly. So youth play an integral role in systemic changes, and this requires integral approaches. And one of the examples, you already alluded to it, is, for example, in liquid hydrogen in South Africa, where the Netherlands is investing in as well. This is, of course, also part of a just transition, but to make this successful, we need to invest in skills for young people. We need to upskill many of the people that are now working in different sectors in order to be able to take up the opportunities that these investments, these huge investments, will bring to these societies. So while the intent of climate action and energy transition is to benefit everyone, it can overlook the point of view of 70 to 80% of the population in Africa, namely youth, if they are not included. So we all should use youth to understand the impact on local communities and on landowners. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much. And as we finish this, let's conclude what we have said with 3 words. For example, if I can conclude what we have discussed here in 3 words, I can say, starts with me. Yes, you can also give us 3 words that can summarize what we have done. 1, 2, 3.
Well, meaningful youth participation.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's great. Meaningful youth participation starts with me. Then?
I'm not sure I can do better than that. I'd go for leadership, equality, and inclusion.
Leadership, equality, and inclusion. Thank you so much. Let's clap hands for the panels. Yeah, so we are very grateful for your time and for the contribution. And if I can ask one question from you. Can you summarize what is discussed here in 1 word? Yeah, 1. So we had 3, 3, 3. If we plus all of them, we get 9, plus 1, we get 10. So we need only 1 to get 10. Informative. Impact, yeah. There we go. Engagement, yes. Participation, yeah. So thank you so much. And now we are going to the best part. Let's look at who have been doing and see how practical it has been, looking at the challenges they have faced and looking at the way forward. So I would like to welcome Miss Shamila. Miss, welcome. And now we are going to have an interview. Yeah, you can take this, mine.
Okay, thank you.
So to begin with, you can tell us who you are And addition to that, you can tell us what does Indalo Inclusive do?
Okay, sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shamila Reid. I'm the Senior Projects Coordinator at Indalo Inclusive, and I mainly focus on the climate policy, climate finance, and just transition portfolios. So Indalo Inclusive is a non-for-profit company based in South Africa, and we have two key strategic focus areas of the work that we do. So first, we support and promote green and inclusive entrepreneurship. And on the other hand, we facilitate and engage in policy dialogue to create this enabling environment for entrepreneurs to thrive. Just to give you quickly a sense of our work very quickly, so we have supported over 1,000 entrepreneurs across South Africa, but our value add is that we predominantly support entrepreneurs operating in rural and township economies in South Africa, and we have a very strong focus on supporting women and youth-led initiatives.
Yeah, thank you so much. But in the works that you have been doing, can you tell us more on the experience while working with youths towards this just transition?
Okay. So I'm going to reflect on a specific project, and while the project targeted a whole community, a big part of that community was young people. So the just transition work that we do in South Africa is really reflective of that two key strategic focus areas. So the project I'm going to talk about is one that we implemented in Dipalising. So Dipalising is a local municipality in Mpumalanga province, as Siri indicated, which is sort of the home of the coal value chain in South Africa. Dipalising is also home to Grootfontein Power Station, which is the next power station to be decommissioned and repurposed in South Africa. And by the way, we also work with the Netherlands Embassy over there. The work that we did there, we started with a very small project, and our role was to coordinate two stakeholder engagements to understand the community's perspective of the just transition, but also the challenges and opportunities that they associate with that. And so the first engagement went really well, I think. I think community members just wanted to understand, community members as well as local stakeholders, what is this just transition thing? What are we talking about? 4 months later, we went back to validate the research findings, and the situation had changed completely because now we were faced with a more hostile community, a community that had actually put us out of the conference venue. So what happened was, in that period of 4 months, more than 1 unit of the power station had closed down. And so people were already starting to negatively feel the impacts of the transition and start losing jobs. And these are mainly your sort of casual laborers within the community that are called on to do maintenance work. And so community members didn't understand why this transition was happening, why the power station was being closed down, and they've not been engaged in the process at all. So they felt very excluded, and I'm happy we had that first Menti meeting because a lot of the things kind of come out in the story as well. So the community members put us out. They said, okay, we want to decide as a community what we want to do, how we want to be involved in this just transition process and how we get involved in that just transition process. So at some point, we were allowed back into the conference room, the convening concluded, and the community members agreed to be part of this process, and I think it's that narrative of not, what is it again? Not us, not for us, without us, exactly. So exactly that. They also established a task team that would then represent the community voice in these engagements. But I think the most critical thing that also came out of that engagement is this request to actually have additional capacity building or have capacity building on what climate change means, what the just transition means. And so 6 months down the line, we managed to make that a reality. And we coordinated with several different partners to make that possible. And in addition to that, we added an additional project to that because we kind of said, okay, so now you understand what climate change means, you understand what the just transition means, but how do we make sure that that leads to something substantial? How do we make sure that you can actually reap social and economic benefits of the projects that we are implementing? So the additional project looked at working with communities to identify, to co-create, and test just transition innovations at the community level. So there are 6 wards within Dipalising, and each ward came up with their own innovation. So in February this year, the different community members pitched their innovations to potential partners. In Dialogues Roles also develop action plans and financial plans for these different interventions so that we can mobilize the resources for it. And there was a lot of interest by different organizations, first to make sure that these interventions result in official enterprises, to refine these interventions to achieve a proof of concept, and then also to put in seed funding to at least achieve a minimal viable product, which we would then scale afterwards. And so we don't have a lot of time, and I'm really happy to engage people on, you know, the sort of technicalities of the approach and whatever happened through that, but I just want to talk about the achievements. And I think the most substantial achievement is changing the mindset of the community and local municipalities for a group of people that were very resistant when it came to the just transition, and we're now starting to see evidence of them starting to embrace the just transition process. And there's of course indicators of that. We have monitoring and evaluation, we have data that kind of supports that. So I'll just throw out a couple of numbers. So 92% of the people that we engage, which is like plus 300 community members and local stakeholders, said that they are eager to learn more about climate change and the just transition. 86% of them felt that the work that we've done with them actually made them think more positively about climate change and the just transition. Are you saying yes or are you saying time? So, I mean, even with the political leadership, we had, at the beginning when we introduced this project, we had one of the political councillors standing up and saying, we don't want this here. We don't want, because we have a previous power station in South Africa that was decommissioned, process didn't go that great, and so they're saying we don't want something similar to happen in Dipalising. And not so long ago, the political leadership of Dipalising actually met and had a resolution to support all the work that Indalo Inclusive and its partners are doing within the municipality. So in that sense, you can see sort of the kind of indicators of success. And I'm going to conclude now with this point. But also, I think I really want to emphasize that it has resulted in so many spin-off initiatives within Dipalising, but also outside of Dipalising. And again, I can't really emphasize the model or the uniqueness of the approach that we took, but we've also been requested to replicate a similar process in 13 other municipalities in Mpumalanga, just because of the nature of the work that we did. And yeah, I'm sorry.
Thank you so much. I think you even answered the questions that I wanted to ask you. And the last question is, if someone else wants to do the same project in somewhere else, because you have done in South Africa, and you know in Africa most problems are common, so it's a matter of looking at how other people are doing and how can I do, depending on the culture and the society that I'm dealing with. What would you recommend, or what are the key takeaways you're taking from this project that if someone else wants to do the same to impact their community has to keep in mind?
So first, I don't think that all problems in Africa are the same. I think there are similarities. And I think I've had this conversation with a couple of people about South Africa specifically. So South Africa has this middle income status. But what people don't know is that we actually have the highest levels of inequality in the world. We actually have the highest of the highest levels of youth unemployment and unemployment in the world globally. And we also have high levels of poverty. So the just transition is a very controversial topic in South Africa. People don't understand why you are closing down the coal power station, which is a valuable asset, and that can generate jobs and provide jobs, whatever the case may be, while we are stuck here not having bread to eat tonight. So I think what And that sort of thinking about, soliciting buy-in from people and, changing the narrative really required us to, build trust with these community members and local stakeholders, as well as build relationships. And I'm going to give a very simple example. After that sort of first initial engagement, when we went back to Dipalising, I remember the first day, there was a lady that walked up to me. She's been part of our previous engagements. And she said, she hugged me, and she was like, "Oh, I'm glad to see you are back. I'm glad you didn't forget about us." And that is what we are always doing as implementing partners and people within the ecosystem. We go to these communities, we develop a project, and we leave, and people never hear about us again. And I think the discussion we had in the ILO session about follow-ups, that communication loop and checking in how things are being done. And so I think that sort of links into that. It was like a light bulb moment for me personally, and I felt like, what we really need here, and given the controversial nature of the Just Transition South Africa, is really to build that trust and to build that relationships with community members, with local municipalities, and with young people. And I think I'll bring that back to Africa, because I think that is where we are all similar in that regard. In Africa, we don't trust our government. We have so much mistrust, and it's not only the government, right? There's so much mistrust between ecosystem partners, but also between young people and ecosystem partners, young people and government. So the cornerstone for just transition in Africa is definitely building that trust and building that relationships. And again, the patience thing. It is not going to happen over time. Indalo could have quickly walked away when we've had that resistance and said, "Oh, we are not going to meet our project deliverables on time," or "Oh, we are not going to." But then you're making it about project management and you're not making it about the people. And at Indalo, we have this saying that it is always about the people. And that's why when you asked me, what do you think about when you think about just transition, I said people. Yeah.
Thank you so much, and let's clap hands for her.
Am I done?
Yeah, so we are done. We are very grateful, and thank you so much for the insights.
Okay.
What we are going to do now, we are going to act now based on what you have done. Yeah, because we will all go home.
Act.
And we will act. Yeah, so we will go to act and practice what you have done. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So what I see from the practical examples we have got, if I can summarize this, is to trust and to be real. Because I remember that there was one man who was going to buy chicken. It was late evening. So when he got to the butcher, he said, "I want a chicken which is 1.5 kilograms. And the seller found out that there was no chicken of 1.5 kilograms. So when he put on the weighing machine, the scale, he found out that it was around 1.4. Then he told him 1.5 is not available. Then he asked again, "Okay, can I get 2 kilograms? Then the seller wanted to sell. So what he did, he put the same chicken, then he pressed with his hand to get the 2 kilograms on the weighing scale. Then said, "Yeah, it's available, it's here." Then you know what the buyer said? "I want both of them." So at the end of the day, we need to be trustworthy in everything that we do, because at sometimes someone might want both of them and we miss all of them. And saying that, I would like to get the closing remarks from Ms. Annika from Include, so that we can end up this session.
Okay,
Thank you so
great.
much.
I know we're already late, so I'll keep it short, and I'll just like to thank everyone for participating, for listening today. I would like to thank IDRC and ILO for their partnership, and I would like to thank Yurian for being here in First Reflections. And I think we're going to close with a call for action. Yeah?
Yes.
Is that going to be put up, or is technology failing us today? Okay, so maybe we can send you home with one thought. So think about everything you heard here today, and on the basis of that, what do you take home? What is your call to action? And I'll leave it at that because I know everyone is really hungry. So thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you very much. And to conclude, I can give you 2 lines from the famous song. As always, who knows this song? You can be the greatest, you can be the best, you can be the King Kong banging on your chest. The only part we know, standing in the Hall of Fame, oh, oh, and the world's gonna know your name. So what we need to know, we need to work hard, and at the end of the day, the world will know our name. Thank you so much for being here.
Would you mind?
Yes, for the partnership. Oh, can we take a picture? My comms team has been asking.
I'll just
I saw you looking at me.
Sarah is from the U.S. Department for Labor. Yeah? Okay. Malik. Bruno Otiato. He's a youth representative with the Central Organization of Trade Unions in Kenya. Welcome, Bruno. And then we do have Sarah Sandelin. Sarah is a Senior International Relations Officer with the U.S. Department of Labor. Welcome, Sarah. And next is Tevin Richard, who is a youth representative with the Federation of Kenya Employers. Welcome, Tevin. And then there's my colleague Isha, who's the Youth Employment and Engagement Officer at the Decent Jobs for Youth Secretariat at the ILO. So let me start off with you, Bruno. We've had some of the challenges young people face in accessing decent work over the last 1.5 days. And now, given these challenges, why is a focus on young people's rights and voices so crucial to the discussion on youth employment? And how would you make the case to stakeholders present here today?
Thank you.
It's an African thing to always do this to confirm the microphone is on. Thank you so much, Caro. Thank you everyone for joining us here. I think for us, I'll give a very trade unionist kind of perspective on why it's very crucial to have this discussion. And for one, we are looking at the statistics. If anything that has been mentioned from the first day by the ILO Director General and the Assistant DG Amaya Sepo, then the statistics speak to the fact that you need to actually look into the interest and the rights of these young people, considering they are not only the future, but they are the present, as it's been said over the time. But other than the statistics showing us, from a very unionist perspective, is that the unions have been missing from the conversation on youth employment and creation. And because of that, we've ended up creating a lot of precarious jobs. The informal sector has kept on growing because most of the employment policies that have been done by government and the private sector have been mostly, they have not reflected the core of the ILO on social dialogue and tripartism. So because of that, we've ended up creating many jobs that make us really think about, are they decent jobs? And that's why we are having this discussion. And if there are so many jobs in the economy, I was looking at my country, Kenya. There is some statistics that came out 2 days ago on the outlook on employment in Kenya by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. And out of the 1 million plus jobs that were created in the past few years, around 80-something% are in the informal sector and only a few 10 or so % in the formal sector. So when you look at that number, then you ask yourself, who is in the conversation on job creation, if any? And for the most part, the conversation has been mostly around government policies that are done mostly by economists from that area, experts from the World Bank for the most part. The ILO has been very supportive. And I was having a conversation with a colleague of the ILO, just making a mention to the fact that the ILO produces very interesting statistics that really many governments many times either don't look, or either the ILO needs to speak about their numbers more, because many times when you look and ask government about job creation, which policies are you looking at? They hardly mention the ILO. It will be the IMF, it will be the World Bank. And the ILO's policies are, as you know, ILO is tripartite, so they are mostly tripartite. So first, it's important because of the population of the young people. Secondly, it's also important because the unions have not been in the conversation. It's also thirdly important because when you look at the rights of young people at workplaces, that means you are thinking about their productivity, because once they know their right, they are going to be productive and they're going to be engaged in jobs that are decent, which promote their rights and freedom.
Thank you so much, Bruno. And turning to you, Sarah, as we discuss youth rights at work, let's talk about the significant proportion of young people in hazardous work. And Bruno has already started speaking about that. 35 million children are in child labor, and these are children between the ages of 15 and 17. And while they may have reached the minimum legal age to work, their right to safe and decent work is not respected. Why is it important, Sarah, to draw more attention to child labor in the policy discussions related to youth employment? And could you please share with us some examples of how the U.S. Department of Labor is addressing the twin challenge of child labor and youth employment while protecting and promoting youth rights at work? It's quite a mouthful. Give it a go.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. I know it's late in the afternoon, day 2, so I think we'll start with a little video just to give you a little snippet of my work, and if technology fails, I'll just launch into something into what I was going to say. So we'll give that just a minute. There were some families that I was talking to that were working on coffee farms, and a lot of these coffee farms entail it's a whole family affair. When I was also talking to these communities, they also shared some stories of the youth, and they said, you know, we have a real big problem here. Our youth keep leaving. And I was like, well, where are they going? And they said, particularly the young boys, they're getting on these big trucks filled with a couple of hundred kids, and they're traveling all the way to South Africa to get a job. And I was like, oh, South Africa? And they said, yes, but the problem is many of them don't make it. They hop off, they get caught by border patrols in other countries, they're out in the bush and they get attacked by animals. And then the few that do make it to South Africa are often the little money that they're earning are giving about 50% to some recruiter or some middle person. So they're stuck in this poverty cycle once again, but now in a foreign country with no support systems. So these communities are like, we need to keep our youth here. And then they continue on to say, and then our young girls. Many families are so poor, they're sending their young girls to the big cities to work in domestic service, and they're barely out of school, they're barely educated, they're going into these family homes, they're doing all these work, and they're getting exploited. They're working long hours, they're getting abused, and they have, again, no support systems around them to they might be earning money, that money's going straight back to their families, and they're captive. And then they continue on to say, and these are all the same communities that I'm having these conversations with, and then they talk about, and then our young men and women that in Ethiopia, there was a lot of investment on industrial parks and really sort of making a go at we're going to bring some big brand names into our country and build these factories and get our workers employed. And then these young men and women were coming from rural communities mostly, barely skilled, jumping into these factories to make t-shirts and Nike shoes and all those great things that we have. And being exploited once again. They're using machines that they barely know how to use and getting injured. They're getting harassed on the job and they don't know their rights. And so I say that as just one example of one country, of the complexities to the problems, that even when there's great opportunities for youth, that unless they know what their rights are, unless they're working with unions and ways to have collective bargaining and have a collective voice so that they're not isolated and picked on, that they can land in real trouble. And so it really does take a multi-prong, a multi-stakeholder, a holistic approach. In particular, as you saw, a lot of the goods that we're talking about are companies and supply chains that we're talking about, from the picking the coffee bean to your cup of coffee that you're getting at Starbucks, and who's responsible. You know, are people using are they using pesticides because of the demand and pressure to build that commodity up? Are they getting actual value chains? Anyway, I could go on forever, but just an illustration of sort of the complexity of issues that we work on and why it's really important.
Thank you, Sarah. And as the video played towards the end, we saw some of the tools. So alongside technical cooperation with countries, could you please speak to us briefly about the tools that the U.S. Department of Labor has developed?
Yeah, you saw a couple of examples. We have, well, one, the app with the report that we produce every year. We have our Congress ask us to produce a report on countries' efforts to address the worst forms of child labour, and we will assess a country's efforts on that. And then much of that results in the report that comes out, so countries can assess what our recommendations are, but also we often provide technical assistance along with that. The supply chain app is really more business-centric, so it's a way for businesses to be more accountable about their supply chains and what they're building up on that. And then I'll say a lot of our projects where we have technical assistance actually in countries are developing tools all the time, such as occupational safety and training, health and training tools, as well as building the capacity of labour inspectors, etc. So we have plenty of tools to share, but just a few.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And turning to Tevin, who represents employers, with the limited opportunities, of course, for wage employment, then especially in developing countries, many young people are driven into entrepreneurship and self-employment. What are some of the specific strategies that employer organizations implement to address the unique challenges of young entrepreneurs?
Thank you so much, Caroline, for the question. Well, I'll just start with the challenges faced by these young entrepreneurs. And ever since I came to this conference, I've interacted with most young entrepreneurs. And I think I'd narrow down to top 3 challenges faced by them. There is access to services, access to finance, and access to a marketplace to showcase their products, skills, and services. As an employers organization, how do we address these challenges? What are the strategies involved? So for instance, let's say something like access to services. Most of these young entrepreneurs, what I love about them, they are technologically savvy. So I think most organizations, we can create platforms whereby they are able to access services. Like for instance, at the Federation, we have a members portal. Why don't we maybe come up with a platform where a young entrepreneur can access services based on pay as you go? Let's say, for instance, they need advisory on, maybe they need a contract or something to be generated for them. I'm so sure these organizations, they have expertise in this. So why don't we just have it on pay-as-you-go services? So this it addresses the issue of services on digital platforms. And then the next thing is employer organization, especially the financial ones, they can provide microfinancing options and grants to facilitate access to venture capital. Now this one will address the challenge of financing. And then lastly, organizing network sessions such as these ones. This session, for instance, it has enabled young entrepreneurs to meet employers. So you'll get that young entrepreneurs are able to showcase their skills. At the same time, entrepreneurs are able to maybe identify their needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Should we just use this one? Yeah, it's on, right? Thank you so much, Tevin. And if I could just come back to that, and this, you've spoken to some of the challenges that, young entrepreneurs pick. They need hand-holding, and that, exposing them to a network would be very beneficial. They need access to finance, and finance is also just not expensive, very expensive, especially in this part of the world, but it's also, apart from the cost, it's also inaccessible because oftentimes young entrepreneurs do not have collateral that is required. So could you please speak to us about maybe an intervention, a specific example that the Federation of Kenya Employers has in place to support young people, young entrepreneurs?
Well, the Federation of Kenya Employers is an umbrella body for employers. At the moment, what we can support young people with, because I believe young people are also employers in their own aspect. They are self-employed, and they have employees. The Federation of Kenya Employers, it gives them an umbrella to safeguard them against any policies. What we do, we lobby for policies that will protect these employers against the harsh entrepreneurial environment. Yes.
And that's really fantastic, because enabling environment is really key to ensure that enterprises can thrive and productivity increased. I'll now turn to Isha. Isha, what are some of the concrete tools and guidance materials youth employment stakeholders can use to ensure young people are aware of their rights and empower them to advocate for their interests?
Okay, this one's working. Thank you, Caroline, for that, and good afternoon, everyone. I think I'm actually impressed that you're attentive and listening, which means you truly must, be engaged on the topic of youth rights, because I know it's been 1.5 days of a very packed schedule of events. I think I won't kind of go back to the numbers. I think, we know the numbers, we know the statistics, and I think at this point we acknowledge that there is the youth employment challenge and the magnitude of it needs sort of serious addressing. What I really would like to re-emphasize, and we spoke about that earlier, is the quality of jobs. The quality of jobs that young people either have or that they have an opportunity to access. And very often these are not what we call decent jobs. And I know you probably are aware of this, particularly as some of you are young people yourselves. But to maybe re-emphasize and bring home the point that these are very often, temporary jobs, precarious jobs. They have little to no social protection. They have very limited avenues for young people to sort of seek representation or voice their concerns. And I'm sure all of us in the room sort of agree that, these are not the jobs that young people deserve. So very often they're driven to these jobs for the lack of better opportunities. They're driven into taking jobs just because there aren't any other alternatives. But I'm sure we all agree that young people deserve more than just the bare minimum. They deserve decent jobs. And I think here just to mention that when we think of youth rights or labor rights, the ILO hopefully is one of the first organizations you would probably think of when we think about rights of people, including young people. And so I would like to introduce you to some of the tools that the ILO has. And perhaps we can first have a short video, and then I can go into explaining a little bit more.
Ibrahim's refugee status make them more vulnerable to unfair treatment in the workplace. Workwise Youth, a guide to youth rights at work. This is Sarah. She recently graduated from university and has started working at an engineering company. There are very few female employees in her company, and she is worried whether she will have equal opportunities to advance her career as her male colleagues. This is Ibrahim. He is a young refugee from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and he works as a barista in Nairobi. He always hesitates to ask for leave as he is afraid of losing his job. Like Sarah and Ibrahim, young workers often worry about facing discrimination, exploitation, or being ill-treated in their workplace. Sarah's gender and Ibrahim's refugee status make them more vulnerable to unfair treatment in the workplace compared to other young people. They are unaware of the rights that could protect them at work. This is where Workwise Youth comes in, a comprehensive guide by the International Labour Organization aimed at enhancing young workers and job seekers' knowledge about their rights at work. This tool includes everything from information on identifying rights violations to ensuring a workplace free from violence and harassment. Educating young workers about their rights at work is not just essential, it's also good for businesses. It enhances young people's personal well-being and boosts productivity. The guide, Workwise Youth, informs about social security entitlements and helps young workers understand different types of employment relationships and their regulations. Keeping in mind the evolving nature of the world of work, the tool also includes information on workers' rights in the digital economy. Youth will learn about decent work conditions, including appropriate working hours, wages, and leave days. They will even see examples of safe and healthy work environments. The guide helps young workers to identify institutions and organizations that can support in realizing their rights at work. Empowering young people to champion their rights at work advances their engagement in the labor market, strengthens economies and, ultimately, paves the way for a sustainable and inclusive future for all. Youth rights matter for the youth, for the economy, and for the future. Find more about Workwise Youth, a guide to youth rights at work, ilo.org/workwiseyouth. The guide has been developed under the Prospects Initiative on advancing young people's engagement and meaningful participation.
About the kind of jobs young people deserve. Oops. Is it me? Do you hear an echo? Yes. So the voice is in my brain. Okay, there we go. Yes. So we were talking about the type of jobs the young people deserve. And so just to talk about what that decent work looks like. So these are jobs that offer young people dignity, equality, non-discrimination, skills, finances, resources that can be, support him. I say him, but I mean support essentially a young entrepreneur in their journey of becoming a businessman, being an employer. So I think when we speak about rights, we should, we're talking about rights of both young people who are employees and workers, but also of employers. So.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Please join us in a round of applause for our panelists. And before we let them go, we'll have a few minutes of Q&A. So please, let's see those hands go up. I see one. And if I could ask, if it's very specific to someone, just say this is for Sarah. Could you speak to this? If it's not, you're not clear, just put it across. So we have Frida, and the gentleman at the front, and my favorite girl.
Hello everyone. My question is to Tevin. I wanted to know whether you're kind of thinking about the new way of being an employer, with the idea that someone can have 3 or 4 people working together with them as an employer, but they are freelancing. So how do you see FKE getting to such people? And at the same time, how do you ensure that they are also following, they are understanding this thing about the workers that they are working, the rights of the workers they are working with?
No, thank you very much to all the speakers. My name is Ariel from Procasur. My question goes to Isha. She said that she could share a bit of examples how this guide has been used, adapted probably, because in our program, Joy program, we are trying to put together what we call my first job survival guide, because we agree totally with you. But the issue is that it's really hard to make this available, universally accessible all the time, right? As this process of employing is recurring and period. So we have done boot camps, things like that. So if you or anybody else could bring out a best practice on that, would be appreciated. Thank you.
The first one is in regards to the rights of employers. I would want to hear some examples of rights of employers. What are the practical ones? And what do we mean when we say rights of employers? But number 2, when we speak of rights, is it possible that rights are also contextual? That maybe rights in Netherlands are not, and this is, I'm playing devil's advocate here. This is, if we look at maybe Netherlands, for example, the rights there would be very easy to fit a world like Netherlands. So certain rights in some areas, say Uganda or Kenya, is it possible that they are hard to implement? And if they're hard to implement, if that be true, what does ILO do to extend that support to organizations so that they're able to implement and ensure that everybody, both employers and employees, receive their rights? Thank you.
Bonjour à tous. Je m'appelle Monsieur Didi. Je viens de la Côte d'Ivoire, représentant donc de la centrale syndicale Humanisme Côte d'Ivoire. Alors, je suis très heureux de participer à cet événement. Ma question est la suivante, parce qu'il faut dire qu'en Afrique, tout ce que depuis hier, nous sommes en train de dire, c'est l'Afrique qui est beaucoup victime. Et je pense que la question est bienvenue pour que nous puissions aller au-delà même de nos réflexions. Alors, madame, notre maman au milieu là, voilà, je voudrais particulièrement m'adresser à elle. Tout à l'heure, vous avez montré une vidéo. Vraiment, la vidéo, elle est très sensible. Voilà. Ma question, c'est de savoir, est-ce une partie de cette jeunesse que vous encadrez ou bien la totalité de la jeunesse? Ça, c'est la première question. La deuxième, comment comptez-vous instruire ces jeunes sur leurs droits et devoirs? Et aussi amener les patrons c'est-à-dire l'employeur a respecté son engagement, ses engagements plutôt vis-à-vis des travailleurs. Le constat que nous faisons, peut-être ailleurs ça existe, mais chez nous en Afrique, ça n'existe pas. Parce que la majorité des codes de travail en Afrique, lorsque vous prenez, aucune feuille du code de travail n'est en faveur de l'ouvrier. Et c'est très difficile. Alors, la dernière question, c'est comment comptez-vous recueillir des fonds? Parce que tout ce que nous disons aujourd'hui, il faut des moyens pour pouvoir accompagner cela. Comment comptez-vous recueillir des fonds pour encadrer cette jeunesse? Et enfin, je voudrais que vous nous parliez un peu de vos projets à venir. Je vous remercie.
I noticed that many people didn't have their translation equipment. So Sarah, I think you would just speak in your response. I think then we will catch along on what the question was. Yeah. So let's maybe start with FKE, Isha, and then Sarah.
This is okay. Thank you so much for the question. You talked about a new way of becoming an employer. Well, I think for the federation, you can join the federation so long as you have employees 1 to 50. Yes, and we'll still provide for you services that other employees who have joined us are receiving. Yes.
They don't see themselves as employers because it's freelance. They've not employed people, but they're working with people.
Oh, about freelance.
Freelance writers or how does this fit in with the freelancer concept?
Would you like, Isha, you want to take that?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to take that in addition as well. I think freelancers are, there is something to say about now that the employment relationships are actually, the employment relationships are blurry. And in many cases, for example, like in the platform economy, we'll be having an ILO discussion next year on sort of deciding what is the employment status of people that fall in this category. So I think when it comes to freelancers, if you're not talking about the digital economy, so usually freelancers would be sort of self-employed people. And I think like Devin was mentioning, for their federation, they need to employ a certain number of people to be then considered a business or an employer of other people. Otherwise, they're sort of a contractual freelancer that comes in a different employment relationship. And so I think in terms of employment relationships, of course, the ILO provides guidance on what are the type of employment relationships that exist based on things like how many people you employ, what is your contract like, what are, say, the provisions that you are entitled to in terms of social security. So that would sort of determine what the employment relationship usually is. So I don't know if that answers your question. And I think I don't know, Tevin, would you like to add something, or should I take Ariel's question?
Actually, I'd mentioned it's between 1 to 50 employees, but it's between 2 and 50 employees. But thanks, Isha, for taking that. You can continue.
Sure, I'll take Ariel's question really quickly. I think in terms of how the guide, I mean, I'm very happy to hear, there is interest in sort of tailoring and using the guide. So some of the examples, so in Cambodia and Indonesia, for example, they used the guide and tailored it first to the local context. So they had to, take into consideration national laws because, as I said, the guide is global, so it doesn't have those. So you first have to tailor the guide and I first translate if that's needed, tailor it to the local context, and then one way of sort of undertaking the usage of the guide is through sort of a awareness campaign, no? So developing materials that are easy to access for young people, meeting young people where they are, which is in the communities, and using sort of advocacy and awareness materials. Another one is that we have used the guide to essentially, we had the Youth Employment Academy last year in Turin, and as part of the training provision, we had, a module on rights. So I think the guide is quite flexible. You can choose what aspect of it applies the most to the population that you're targeting. In Eastern Europe, for example, they tailored it to migration. So they kind of looked at young migrants and how the guide can be tailored to that population. And then it can be rolled out through a TOT sort of format where you train trainers that then are able to, work with young people and hold workshops that increase young people's awareness. But the guide can also be used, once it's been localized, it can also be used directly because there are sort of session plans and materials and exercises and case studies that can govern usage. Another way has been a gamified application. So of course that's a much of a higher budget exercise, but they've used the material to develop an app, particularly during the COVID pandemic in Macedonia and Moldova. So in Northern Macedonia and Moldova, they were able to sort of tailor it into an application that young people could access, and they could sort of report also rights violations and sort of peer support each other as well. So these are some ways, and I'm sure we can chat more on some examples.
Go to Sarah. It's very interesting what you call this guide that you have. You said it's called My First Job Survival Guide. Interesting choice of words. Why?
Because of the same we are discussing, right? Many of the rural area, the jobs are created by micro small enterprises, right? Yeah. So they have a very low level of structuration. When they get somebody in, there is no job description. There is no idea on how to provide feedback to the youth. So there are a good chance that at the first conflict, the youth will take off.
There we are. Not so good with the microphone. Is that on? Yes, okay. Sorry. So the young gentleman at the back asked us several questions, about 4, but I may be able to answer this. Hello, testing. Okay. So it's getting late in the day too. Thank you for your questions from the young gentleman at the back. He asked about the video that we had shown and the topic being quite sensitive. Also, it's ready to quit. All right, we're all ready to end the day, I see. The second question was about youth rights with employers and how do we tackle this issue, and then sort of funds to mentor youth were sort of the 3 questions that I got from the first part that I think I can bundle in. One example of a project that we have in Ghana, for example, was tasked with focusing on the cocoa sector, and a lot of what we try to do is have a multi-prong approach, and that really means involving the government at the national level to have policies that really protect workers at all levels, but it also ensures that the private sector comes involved, and so they brought in Olam, which is a cocoa producer, to say, how are you assessing your supply chains and protecting your workers? But it also went really worked at the district level with people there, but also really into the communities to say, what is it that you need? Why are you reliant on child labour, for example? What can we do to help you? Often, in my experience, especially in the Africa context, they need to diversify their incomes especially when it's not harvest season, for example, in the agricultural sector, or if seasons go poorly and they don't have social protections, what are some buffers that they can have? But also training, the portion here to sort of connect the dots with training youth is really ensuring that idle youth are engaged and understand that there are future prospects, and even if they go into agriculture, that there's ways to add to the value chain and maybe get into agro-processing, or sort of they're not don't have to stay in that cycle necessarily. There are other avenues and other skills that you can obtain to get other jobs. But it's also taking, ensuring that educators are part of the conversation as well. Again, in Africa, a lot of the time it's building community dialogue and having elders come into that conversation, youth come into that conversation, educators. But I will say that if you don't work at all the levels systematically, that it will break apart and you won't get a good holistic solution. It really needs to come from the local level. Often when we go into those local communities as well, they'll say, well, we can't tackle anything until we get our water pump is fixed. This is our issue today and this is our priority. So sometimes you have to work through the several issues before you can get to the real problem, if that makes sense. So, and then I think the last one you asked about was future projects. We're always funding new projects. We have projects all around the world tackling these issues in various ways. Again, they're complex. It depends on the context and where you are. Sometimes it's more government to government, bilateral. Sometimes it's working with the ILO. Sometimes it's really working with the private sector. And sometimes it really is at the local level, or with all of those in that complexity. I hope I answered most of your questions. Thank you. I think there's someone at the back that has.
Yeah, thank you. There is a question that we haven't responded to. The nuance of rights. Who is willing to take that on? Bruno? Okay.
Right. Sorry, I didn't get your name clearly. Pearl, like a friend. Okay. All right. I think it's quite an interesting question. My training is in political science and in law in that area. It then would, because I'm looking at it whether rights are contextual or not, and trying to think whether human rights are actually human rights, quote unquote, because of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. When you look through the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, there are quite some rights that, even reading the American Declaration of Independence, are kind of rights that are alienable. You can't really take them away from a human being. And in a way, from also a very trade unionist perspective, the most form of abused rights, human rights, are labor rights. So many times it is taken to look like states that probably implement these rights are better states, and therefore maybe they are designed to implement these rights, and other states that don't implement these rights maybe are weaker states who maybe these rights are not meant for these kind of states. But actually they are human rights, because trade union rights are in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and there are states that have committed themselves to implementing these rights. There are states that, and that's why we have to thank the ILO, because the ILO has come in handy. For instance, let me give you an example of Kenya. When we were doing the labor rights, the 5 sets of labor laws in 2007 in Kenya, it's the support of the ILO that, through their technical assistance and cooperation development projects, they come in and they ask, what are you doing in terms of the labor rights? So they provide the technical capacity, the financial capacity for the country to actually do these labor rights. And since 2007, we have seen with the labor rights that were done in 2007 in Kenya through the support of the ILO, when Kenya was redoing their constitution that was done in 1963, in 2010, labor rights were taken as part of human rights in the Bill of Rights in the Constitution, Article 41. So you find all Kenyan workers enjoy a right to join a union, a right for a CBA, they have all these rights that other states probably don't view as human rights, but with the support that we continue receiving, you see states coming in to now implement these rights. And it actually ties to the question on freelancing, because this is something that has, I think, since COVID-19 and with the investment in digital economy, these are new frontiers of work that are emerging. So it is now incumbent upon us, some of the social partners here, to have a conversation about the new forms of work and whether the labor laws actually or kind of define a worker in this context. Because even in Kenya, where we come from, if you look at a freelancer in the whole 5 sets of labor laws, you can't find that term. They have not defined that as a worker, so you or an employer. So we have to have a round table again to ensure that some of the labor laws that you might view them as a cake done in the 2007 because of the changes in the world of work, so that we ensure they are up to date. So, yeah.
I know we're very short on time, so I think the short answer is rights is rights. Now, whether they are the way they are sort of in each country. So the reason that I say rights are rights is because ILO, as a standard-setting organization, our bread and butter is sort of ensuring that we we kind of give guidance on what should be the ambition, right? What are the provisions that really govern the working life of people, including, of course, young people. So I think I wouldn't say rights are contextual, because the idea is that we say that these are the rights that young people are entitled to. So there needs to be sort of there needs to be some guidance as to what is the guidance in terms of, say, what are minimum hours of work, what is the safe social protection benefits that young people are entitled to. And so to give countries guidance as to what is an acceptable, adequate amount of these things, there needs to be some guidance, and that's where the ILO plays a key role through the international labor standards, and that's negotiated by governments, employers' organizations, and workers' organizations. Of course, when it comes to individual countries, then we provide the guidance, and we provide the guidance as to what should be sort of the standard. But then they are implemented differently in different countries, and that's as per national law. But national law should be governed if, say, a country is party to a convention. So if they ratify a convention, an ILO convention that sets out sort of the standards in a particular area, such as the minimum hours of work, then the country, it's the responsibility of the country that, say, ratifies a convention to then implement as per that convention the national law. So that's the sort of guidance that the ILO provides. So I think, of course, there are different ways that rights are implemented, or the national laws in each country are different. But as the ILO, we provide the guidance as to what should be the norm, what should be the standard in terms of the rights governing these different areas that we discussed.
Thank you so much. And to think that not too long ago, we really didn't have, you could work endless hours, and it was okay. Weekends, what is that? Minimum wage. So rights, we've come a long way in rights, and level will vary depending on different factors, but then there's the standard to which countries should aspire to. We'll wrap this up so that we can join the high-level panel at Kiev, and just two key takeaways from this panel. One, that even as the world of work is changing, rights need to remain central, and especially rights of young people. In a context of unemployment as well, it really doesn't matter whether there are few opportunities or not. Rights of youth are really critical, and this is best done through social dialogue, and I think Bruno spoke to that in a really great way, so that there's really discussion from the employers, from the workers, from the governments on how then are these rights taken forward. And tools are available a lot. We heard about that guide. We've heard about, of course, and spent some time on Workwise Youth. And of course, Sarah spoke to us about some of the tools that are available from the US Department of Labor. And probably some of you already work with young people. You do have tools. And I would also encourage you not just to keep them to yourselves, but to find a way of sharing these with as many other stakeholders as possible, but most importantly, reaching as many young people as possible so that they don't have to suck it up like some of us have been asked to. Thank you so much. Really want to appreciate again Isha, Tevin, Sarah, and Bruno. And thank you so much for your attention. See you in the main hall. Have a good evening.
And I am a 2021 Mandela Washington Fellow alumna. I collaborated with Sarah Cohen in this project to kind of give digital voices to people with visual impairment.
In this case, we wanted to address the topic of barriers to access for inclusion for people with disabilities in Nigeria, particularly in Lagos. We produced this short film and actually launched it at an event where we invited the US consulate as well as several prominent employers in the Lagos area to come and share in a horizontal style dialogue and training.
Now, to include us, we visually impaired, into the society helps change the mindset of other visually impaired people that are out there, because there are many of us out there that actually lost hope and they feel there is nothing they can ever do.
This program is actually very interesting and mind-blowing as well, knowing that we are looking at inclusion.
So one of the key things I've learned from this program today is the fact that a lot of these people with disabilities are actually well-trained. Some are graduates from universities.
Today has been insightful for me. It has been inspiring. I get to know there are better opportunities for me out there.
From there, we launched a disability employment manual that can help serve as a guide for employers when they're thinking about how to build more inclusive workplaces.
The manual, I mean, that's just really high level, because there's a lot of shallow work, especially with NGOs, but I see how Rachel is so detailed, you know, and how they are trying to make sure they are not just doing something on the surface, but they are really going deep to create solutions for people living with disabilities.
We ourselves as employers, as Nigerians, should also try to be a bit more accommodating, because one, this is our responsibility, it is our obligation to actually do this, and for them it is a right.
And I'm just really happy that very soon, through the amazing work Rachel and Sarah are doing, you know, their stories will be out there and everyone will get to see that these people are really skilled.
We feel the need to do this strongly because we want to change this concept from a concept of compliance to a concept of truly inclusive workspaces.
Sarah and Rachel are actually doing a great job. It's basically giving people with disabilities a voice, especially in these hard times.
They are doing a very great job. May God strengthen them the more.
They really tried that they have something like this for disabled. It's also been fun because I got to laugh a lot today, and I was very, very happy today.
And I'm definitely excited to see where it goes, and Really hope that this is the start of some significant impact and some significant increase in inclusion for people with disabilities in the workplace in Nigeria and around the world.
It started July 2013.
After I delivered my baby through CS, I discovered that my vision was blurred.
I lost my sight in 2013. I had glaucoma.
Then I found out my left eyes was already gone.
I could not see my baby again. I could not see my husband again.
Some people in my family have this belief that blindness is a curse.
Then of what use am I then? I lost my dad, now I'm losing my second eyes.
What does inclusion mean to me? Inclusion means making sure that nobody's left behind.
Inclusion for me is when we all have that knowledge, the tutelage on how to get to work and live like a normal person or someone that is sighted.
It will include us, we visually impaired, into the society. Helps change the mindset of other visually impaired people that are out there.
Inclusion to me means not being discriminatory, being part of the process, being part of the solution, and also being part of an ecosystem.
It gives hope to a visually impaired person.
I lost my sight in 2013, and ever since it hasn't been very easy.
I was walking on the road, then I just walked into potholes. Then I stopped. I looked back, but I can see the road. I was not able to see the potholes, but I could see the road smoothly.
Even my brother asked the ophthalmologist that, can replacements and eyeball replacements be done? The ophthalmologist said no, so that he can give me one of his own eyes.
Whenever I bump my leg, the next thing I hear is, can't you see? You know I can't see, and you're asking, can't you see?
Right now, I'm in the Federal Nigerian Society for the Blind, and I'm getting myself equipped to move into the world, the general world of people that are sighted.
But coming here, actually the story changed. I found that I wasn't alone. There are other people that are also blind, that are visually impaired, like myself. Then I actually learned to be happy, because without sadness, one can never know what happiness is.
And since I came here, I discovered that yes, there is still something I can do. That I can't limit myself here, I still have hope. So I grabbed my visions again. There's some stigma in the country. Because the stigma exists, in the mindsets of the recruiters, they wouldn't want to have to deal with that. So from the get-go, they will not even get into the funnel to be selected.
I believe I can go back into teaching. I can become a professional teacher.
There's a lot of organizations now
are saying, oh, people that are, that have, that are living with some disability or the other are encouraged to apply. That's somehow like tokenism, because they say that, but they haven't adequately prepared for that.
If I get an opportunity to be interviewed, I will tell them basically the basic skills I have.
As a nation, we start with what did you study? But in reality, we know that what we studied is one thing, what we can do and what we need to do are two different things.
I love teaching because I studied education.
So I would be focusing on one, the key expertise, the core areas of specialization.
I work as a laboratory technologist in a laboratory.
Before I lost my sight, I was into printing.
The skill I have is writing. This new world I am now, so I'm trying to refine that writing skill to be able to suit into this present state I am now.
I love singing, acting.
If I am employed, I think I'll work towards building the company and taking the company to greater heights.
The advice I would give an employer who wants to employ a visually impaired person is firstly, do not look at the person physically, like what you see physically. Because when you look at the physical self, you see blindness and you feel, no, this person isn't worth it.
Visually impaired should not be looked down. They should not underrate us that we can't do anything.
Is this person capable? Test the knowledge of that person. When you find that this person, okay, has the knowledge, has the skills, has the ability to actually perform even more than a sighted person, then you go ahead and employ.
I seek for inclusion and I seek for the best in life.
For other organizations, move from tokenism, walk the talk.
People that are sighted, there's people that can see clearly, perfectly clearly. And they shouldn't use our present situation to mock us.
I see you, we see you, and the way you're confused, the way you're wondering how, is the way people on the other side are wondering how you're managing. If I bring you in, am I sure I'm providing the right place for you? And because of that, we need to come out.
We lost our sight, not our brain, not our memory, not our sense of reasoning, not our sense of thinking, just our sight. So they should please stop mocking us. They should please stop mimicking us or using our situation to close doors against us. That's what I'd like to say.
I was looking for a job and I saw one advertised online. At the end of the interview, the person interviewing me asked, "Are you sure you can do this job?" She made a statement saying, "I saw you when you walked in." That was when it dawned on me that she was referring to my disability. I believe a lot of people are blinded by prejudice and stereotypes. They've been accustomed to working with people who don't have disabilities.
You are competing with the same able people with the limited job opportunity there.
Accommodating people with challenges and disabilities has become a bit of an issue. Inclusive workspaces opens doors for people from all backgrounds.
It gives opportunity for diversity and also provide engagement, employee engagement and retention. Most appealing is their inclusiveness. They are giving more opportunity for underrepresented people and also the opportunity to be professionally groomed.
The entire Youth to Work program is very accommodating. In fact, they were encouraging women and people with physical challenge or disabilities to apply, and I thought that was an environment that would accommodate me without any prejudice or any stereotypes.
It has exposed me a lot, hands-on experience.
During our training sessions, we've had teamwork, we've had group discussions, and from those discussions and those teamwork, I have been able to build on my interpersonal skills, and I have also further been able to speak confidently in public. I believe there are people with physical challenges or disabilities who have a lot to bring on board on organizations, and if they are given the opportunity, they could have a lot of impact on organizations to grow.
You're looking at the person with disability and you're thinking. Don't think. You're looking at the person with disability and you're rationalizing. Don't rationalize. Allow them express. Allow them act. Allow them practice and learn from our experiences. Because it is only when you do that that you can find out that we can walk, and also win.
We live in a world where some people think being blind, deaf, lame can be a curse, a taboo, or virus. There's a need for the world to realize that persons living with disabilities
can also work and win. If we give them the opportunity, they can also exhibit their talent. But when we stigmatize them, they can only lose. It's high time we let our whole society include and access this individual.
Kwa mradi huu tunatarajia kupanga kozi jambo hilo lisilowezekana linaweza kuwezekana. Na ulemavu kamwe sio laana. Jiunge nasi kila mtu kwenye safari hii ya uvumbuzi, kwa pamoja tuvunje kila mpaka. Asante.
Wow, about myself, when I arrived in Zaleka, I found that there was no job and there was no suitable schools which I could continue my education. So I applied for tailoring. I did tailoring, 6 months of training. After I completed, the following year, I went for Bible school.
I started my education quite, young. I attended St. Catherine Model College, then moved ahead to Regan Memorial Baptist Girls Secondary School, and then they came at me. My eyes started. My eye could not see again. Then I was about to write my mathematics examination, and they said, no, you cannot write it. I underwent surgeries, which did not do any good to my eye. And here I am, a blind person, a certified blind person. And from there, I came to the most prestigious university, right? University of Lagos, where I had, my bachelor's degree in mass communication. And afterwards, I concluded with the master's in public and international affairs at the same University of Lagos.
In DRC, I study about languages like French, like English, and others languages which we were learning there in DRC. Okay. But I didn't finish my study.
I am 67 years old. Yeah. In our time, I did not go further with my education because we had no secondary schools. Mm-hmm. The only secondary school was Msanje at that time, and the only 2 people were being selected. So I did standard 8 for 6 years, which means I graduated there.
I went to a blind school, Asirule Pacheli School for the Blind, because I actually lost my sight at a young age. And after which I went on to Federal Government College, Ijaniki.
An inclusive school for both blind and sighted. And after which I proceeded into University of Lagos, where I backed my BA in history. My soft skills and professional skills for me is acquiring soft skills like computer literacy.
Thank God for the software developers that at least have the visually impaired in mind and able to create a software, a screen reader that enable me to use my computer with utmost ease.
I've done a number of trainings. I'm a certified content marketer, inbound marketer, and SEO expert. So I have experiences in audio recording, audio editing. I write, I'm a voiceover artist, and I also do a little bit of video directing. So I have experience working with the Guardian newspapers. At the moment I work with Sterling Bank, Nigeria. On the side, to make a little bit of income, I also play the talking drum.
Uvira nilikuwa niko nasoma. Wakati wazazi walipofariki, na mimi nikaachia msomo la 4. Nina elimu yangu kidogo tu ya kusoma na kuandika. Nilikuwa katika biashara nilikuwa najipiga maisha ya kwenda huku na kule kwa kupata jinsi ya kuishi. Yenyewe limakala kwa kuna kudoa na pita skulu na kuziandi tu mpaka form 4. Koma form 4 yake sina chile bwino moti kozo lembelwa ntchito. Ndinachivomereza ndinamba business. Ndinaziwa kuti kukhala ndi chilema sikulephera. Paka business panova ikuteka pang'ono.
2017, eventually it was decided for me. I went totally blind. And you know, I came in contact with something that many people might find very strange. I became free. I became free. You know, being standing in the middle all my life, and then totally blindness came, and it was just the start of everything. I started developing skills. I learned how to use the computer and how to read with Braille. I went and wrote my JAM. I scored 248. It was amazing. I came into University of Lagos, was admitted for sociology, and look, the story has been great and great and great all along.
So when you have a person with disability, say a blind person or a visually impaired person, in the midst of persons without disability, and they are able to comfortably talk, they are able to comfortably interact, you know, within the space, within the discussion, not just talking about disability or impairment, right? You're able to talk about climate change, you're able to talk about the sustainable development goals, you're able to talk about, you know, things that are happening, right? That's inclusion for me.
Inclusion is you. Inclusion is everyone entirely. The moment that you can give somebody else that you think is different from you the chance to speak where you are, they can be what you can be. They can do what you can do. The ability that you give them to do these things is what inclusion implies.
Lima vanga zintu zosiyana ngati kulima, kugulisa ndiwo, kugulisa tomato. Anthu amayankhula adi zambiri kuti anthu awa mwina kumakaniko kugula malonda kumene koma ukakhala wakhama anthu aja amazasiya zimenezo chifukwa amazindikira kuti iwenso ndiwe munthu ngati omwe. Ndikhoza kunena kuti kukhala ndi chilema sikulephera. Ukhoza kupanga zinthu zomwe wina aliyense amapanga. Bola mwini wake usazionere pansi.
So about inclusion, first of all, when I arrived here in Zaleka, so I felt accepted with this organization, Umoja People with Disability, because they are helping me to study about the computer, and they are helping me to study for free.
Bias itself, you know, is mostly caused by the employers of labor.
Right, because I remember when I started the job, you know, in the radio station, they were like, how would you, if we send you, you know, this document, will you be able to access it? So now, that kind of a thing, imagine someone scanning or snapping a photo for me and telling me to, you know, say or translate it. How would you? You're rather magnifying my impairment and placing a disability in that in that area. So there are challenges like infrastructural challenges, attitudinal barriers, communication barriers too as well.
To my side, I can say that when I completed my skills as a tailor, the one who was the manager there accepted me easily because he knew my category of education. But those colleagues whom I found at that working place, they did not accept me easily. They were laughing at me. They were bringing a lot of challenges to my side. I once wanted to drop out to stop it because of their negative words.
So if I were to be sitting across from a hiring manager, what I would tell him or her is that persons with disability have all their faculties intact. So for example, I'm visually impaired, but does not take away the fact that I can still contribute meaningfully to your company. So why we want to not employ someone because of their disability when on the long run they can still contribute to your income, because hey, companies are there to make profit. So if a person with disability can give you the profits that you need, why not do it? Why are you excluding them?
A lot of organizations, NGOs have been a great support to me in assisting, in being the intermediary between me and the employers out there. Organizations like IREDE Foundation, MTN Foundation, Project Enable, INGA, and a lot, because this is the people that are clamoring for inclusion here. For instance, IREDE Foundation, they really helped because I had a program with them which they connected me to work with a travel agency, and honestly it was such a fun experience. So organizations like that have been a great support.
Advice which I could give to the employers in Dzaleka, in Malawi, even around the world, is that one, they need not to neglect the people living with disability. They need to give them suitable education. They need to help them to support their families for tomorrow's future. We've got families. Those children whom we have, if you don't give us work, how are we going to educate our children? How are they going to be greater in future? How are they going to support the society if you fail to give us the work which you could support our children? Like the way I am. I have 2 children. I don't have a husband. There are a lot of things that my husband spoke to me when he married me. I used to cry. They are bad words. When he looks at me, he sees a disabled person. He used to bring out insults.
And as you have seen and heard from them, they have various experiences that life has produced for them. And we want to ensure that this movie breaks out all of the stereotypes and biases that subjugates them for not enabling them gain access to jobs. And that is one of the reasons why my partner Tuson Farini and I decided to come together from both African countries to see how we could give meaning into people with disabilities, especially youths with disabilities who experience one sort of marginalization or the other. We believe that you who is watching this movie, an employer or an advocate or a legislature official, can see reason to say, hey, we want to transform the status quo. We want to increase the number of people with disabilities into the workforce. And so we beg and enjoin you. We want more voices, more resources. We want to ensure that people with disabilities in both countries and other African countries, can get out of the stereotype and get access to jobs or entrepreneurship. Who says that you can't be, working with someone who has blindness or someone with cerebral palsy? They're just human. All you have to do is enrich your talent. They have it. So get it out of them. Be part of the movement. Be part of the voice in order to create a more inclusive world. We want to say a big thank you to the Mandela Washington Fellowship. We want to say a big thank you to the U.S. Department of State. We want to say a big thank you to IREX, because without them, we wouldn't have pulled out this project. Thank you for being part of this Voices. And we indeed know that this film will break almost all of the stereotypes around employment for people with disabilities.
On and on, they keep telling us that the government is, responsible for us. They have to be the ones to put things in check. And I totally agree. They've done it with the 5% Disability Act, that employers of labor should employ persons with disability. Are these people doing it? Probably not yet, and that's the purpose for which we are doing this project. We want you, persons of the public, listening to us, giving us the chance to speak, to see us for what we are and apply to the laws. And we, as persons with disability, we keep on improving ourselves, we keep on upgrading, we keep on proving to the world that yes, we can do it. And we hope that when we stand and when we shine, you will give us the ability to walk, to work, and then to win.